Chapter 21 The Late Loya and the Embarrassed Mole. Right in front of the naval headquarters, a large port. 7 large warships are neatly displayed here. This year's recruit battalion has a total of 7 teams, 1 for each team, just to load all the recruits and their entourage. Teams of recruits stood on the deck in military postures, facing the scorching sun. Their clothes were soaked with sweat and then dried by the sea breeze, leaving an ugly circle of salt stains. Loya is so slow. Yeah, look, the instructor's face is dark. Shish, keep your voice down, Admiral Zephyr is watching us over there. Yes, we have to maintain our image. Not to mention the impatience of the recruits, the rest of the admirals are impatient. Although Loya is indeed talented, what is the trouble with releasing so many pigeons? Is this the rhythm of preparing to clean the toilet for a year? On the warship of the 7th team, the Major General Instructor came to the Zephyr, gave a salute and asked in a low voice, "Teacher Zephyr, why don't you go ahead with the other warships, we can just wait here." The actual combat assessment of recruits in the Navy headquarters is a compulsory assessment for all members. After all, the Navy is not a nursing home. How will soldiers who do not see blood fight against pirates in the future? So this time, a full 7 warships were used, one of which was accompanied by at least 1 Major General of the headquarters, and even the former General Zephyr. The current situation is that several Lieutenant Generals and Major Generals, a former General Zephyr, hundreds of recruits and naval officers are staying at the port, waiting for a recruit. It's no wonder that the Major General's instructor would say this. That is, he was a little embarrassed to let Zephyr continue to wait. After all, he was his own soldier. Hearing his words, Zephyr drank a cigar and frowned with a headache. Let the other warships set off first, but it's not very good to wait here. We will set off in 10 minutes, if he dares not to come. Come back and see how I deal with him. After finishing speaking, Zephyr sighed in his heart, complaining why he didn't take action last night, so that he is now basking in the sun on the deck, and it's not easy to get angry. After all, he watched the whole time when Loya was frozen. Since Zephyr, who is the chief instructor, said so, the Major General Instructor naturally wouldn't say much, just turned around and left with a salute. After notifying the other warships through the phone, in the midst of the honking of the harbor, he turned around and shouted at the recruits who were discussing behind him, "Everyone please be quiet. You are the Navy, you are soldiers. Strictly observe discipline and show the appearance of soldiers. Got it? I can't take care of Loya and I can't take care of you guys." The recruits on the deck kept their voices neatly and shouted loudly after standing at attention. Understood. Didn't eat. Loud. Understood. Watching the Major General and the instructor rectify his discipline on the side, Mole held the hilt at his waist and came to Zephyr's side. "Mr. Zephyr, what the hell did Loya do last night? Is he afraid?" Mole's injuries haven't healed and he's not ready for a high-intensity fight, so as soon as Sengoku brought it up, he agreed to take part in the mission, move his muscles, and deal with a little trouble. Hearing Mole's words, Zephyr sighed and said to the disciple beside him who he valued a lot, "A person who can kill the scissor pirates with a blank face, do you think he will be afraid of the actual combat test?" After a pause, Zephyr held his forehead and said, "Last night, Loya and Kuzan had a test. He was frozen into a popsicle by Kuzan's ice age. I thought it would take a long time to break free. Tonight hey." Mole didn't know how to continue. Since Zephyr said the words, "I thought," he must have been there at the time. "So what is this? Shoot yourself in the foot." The speechless Mole had to take out a box of cigars from his jacket, took out one, and asked, "Teacher, do you want one? I bought it by the way last time I was on a mission. It's a special product of the Golden City." Zephyr. At this moment, a figure gradually approached from the air, and soon came to the top of the deck. Then came a 720-degree turn in the sky to connect to the side windmill, and landed gracefully in a half-kneeling posture. Loya stood up and patted his clothes, opened his mouth wide, revealing 8 shiny doors. "Kiba, yo. Good morning everyone. Before he finished speaking, Luoya immediately collapsed on the deck with a buttocks on his face, with an expression on his face that I was already a salted fish. He opened his eyes hard, and stretched his hand tremblingly towards the mole. Mole. Lord Rat, tell me. You brought seasickness pills. Why don't I bring that with me? Mole Point Kiba growled. I'm dying. Wow. Hey, don't vomit on me. The people have arrived, and after the Major General Officer asked for instructions, he ordered the ship to sail. Woohoo. The warship left the port and moved forward at full speed, on the one hand to catch up with the warship in front, and on the other hand because there was a half-dead guy on the ship who was spitting up, and it was full of sour water. It was really a coincidence, because it was an actual combat assessment. The ship doctors accompanying this warship were all experts in trauma, and they were directly numb when it came to seasickness. And, who knew there would be naval seasickness? Are you fed up with seasickness medicine? In the end, Zephyr couldn't stand it anymore. The dignified recruits of the headquarters, the main combat power of the Navy in the future, and even Loya, who was designated as a member of the elite battalion by him, was seasick. He wouldn't have believed it if Sengoku hadn't reminded him. The angry Zephyr pushed the ship doctor and the recruit who supported Loya away, and slammed it with a fist. Bang! The world suddenly became clean, and the surrounding recruits swallowed and looked at the big bag on Loya's head and the relieved expression on his face. Hey, you were knocked out, don't show such a happy expression. Throwing Loya back to the cabin, the warship soon recovered calm. The recruits were either anxiously looking around, or nervously wiping their weapons, trying to appease their inner unease. After all, they are still a group of recruits, unlike Loya who has seen blood. Even if they knew that their destination was a small island specially used by the Navy for assessment, there were no vicious pirates on it, only groups of beasts, but the tension and anxiety still lingered in their hearts. The elite assessment is very serious, but not very top secret, just like the college entrance examination before Loya's time travel. Although the exam questions are kept secret from the recruits, the subjects are exposed. In this regard, Zephyr was very helpless. The recruits in the past have more or less blood, but this year's recruits are good. Even if they know the exam subjects, they have performed so poorly, and there is basically no eye-catching. The only Loya who is decent in all aspects is not a descendant of the Orthodox Navy, nor was he recruited by conscription, but was picked up from the island by the good luck of the mole. So he could see that the problem of the naval power fault is still very serious. Seeing Zephyr's headache, Mole naturally knew what his teacher was worried about. He dawdled forward and took out a cigar. Don't worry about teacher, there will always be a solution, besides this time is not as there another Loya. The elite ones are good too, things aren't so pessimistic. Come on, smoke a cigar, this time it's the top of the shamboard. Zephyr squinted at him. What the hell did you guys think? Ah, the so-called acquaintance Mo Ruofu. Wrong, the acquaintance Mo Ruishi. Mole's unusual behavior today has long caught Zephyr's attention. After all, Lieutenant General Mole is a well-known type of old-fashioned and steady type. Today, he does use cigars to bribe himself again and again. What do you think? Neither is normal. After being silent for a long time, facing Zephyr's impatient expression, Mole scratched the back of his head embarrassedly. That. Teacher, it's about Loya. He asked me to ask you to tell Marshal Sengoku, and arrange for him later. The task of stationing the headquarters, do not let him go to sea. After speaking, Mole hurriedly waved his hand. Of course, the decision of this matter is in your hands, teacher. If it doesn't work, it's nothing, ha ha ha. Zephyr looked at him strangely, wondering in his heart. This kid, why are you suddenly talking about this? Mole laughed awkwardly, and found that Zephyr didn't speak. He put down his hand sullenly, and nodded solemnly. Okay teacher Zephyr, I understand, I'll go and reject him. Mole was embarrassed to death, thinking bitterly in his heart, stinky boy. How dare you threaten me to do such a thing, go back to Lousy and you will never end. To talk about why Loya did this, it was because one day he heard Kuzan mention the arrangement for the members of this elite battalion. Because their strength is generally not as good as before, they will basically be sent to the 4 major sea areas to experience. This is marine fodder. Great route. Even if the Navy has a black-tech warship, it will take at least 10 days to go to the 4 major sea areas. Staying on the ship for more than 10 days, and even going to sea to perform tasks frequently after arriving, isn't that killing it? That's why Loya made Mole cheeky to ask Zephyr. As for the reason why the mole would agree, does it count as an injured mole spending all day in the office peeking at exciting magazines? Chapter 22 exam begins. The third one. Ask for collection, ask for recommendation. Just when Mole was about to give up and leave, Zephyr said slowly, I will discuss these matters with Sengoku. This voice sounded like a sound in Mole's ears, and he saluted in surprise. Yes, thank you teacher. Then he ran to the cabin like a wind, ready to exchange the photo in Loya's hand. Along the way, the warship sailed into the windless belt and stopped in the bay of a medium-sized island. This is an island that has never been marked on a map. It has been used by the Navy as a training ground for recruits since decades ago. Because the magnetic field of this island is very weak, except for the permanent pointer, the nautical pointer will not point here at all, and it is concealed enough. Moreover, there are many native and powerful creatures on the island, plus the beasts that the Navy rushed in one after another to stock up, which is completely enough to serve as a test place for recruits. Ordinary recruits from the 4 seas naturally do not need to be assessed, but as recruits of the headquarters, the future elite of the Navy, this trial of blood and fire is indispensable. The island is lush with vegetation. Looking from the humble port, only green leaves can be seen, and 2 yuhi crabs are walking on the beach, which is a peaceful and quiet scene. But the occasional vicious roar from the depths of the island proves that it is not as peaceful as it seems. Many recruits swallowed and looked at each other. Hey, shouldn't we be going to the island? It should be. I heard from the seniors that this island is full of beasts that eat people. Hearing this, the people around became even more nervous. Well, it's scary. The people on the surrounding warships were lined up neatly, waiting for Zephyr to issue an order. The latter nodded to the mole and ordered the messengers to start informing the ships to prepare for the assessment. The instructor of the 7th team where Loya was in stood at the front and shouted loudly, Next, there will be an elite assessment. Now, I will tell the rules again. Your mission is to hunt down the creatures on this island and get points. The time limit is 3 days. Only the top 3 points can hope to join the elite camp. The creatures on the island are strong and weak, and the points obtained are also from high to low. Even if you step on a crab to death, you still get points. Quote. The Major General's instructor pointed at the crabs on the beach and made a rare joke, but the effect was not very good. The recruits were still uneasy and nervous. Seeing that no one answered, the Major General instructor coughed twice and continued. This assessment is an individual battle, but it is allowed to form a team. After forming a team, as long as multiple people participate in the attack, the points will be divided equally among everyone. In addition, there are surveillance phone bugs everywhere on the island, so don't take chances. Your every move is under our watch. Everyone came to collect the smoke bombs for help when they left. Although there are many surveillance phone bugs on the island, even in the sky, but if you really meet an unmatched powerful creature, the phone bug can't inform you of your location. In the event of an accident, you can use this cry for help and tell us where you are. It's just that you all remember that anyone who uses the distress signal will get 0 results. And, the Major General instructor said solemnly, this does not mean that you are all safe. Once you encounter a powerful beast that cannot be resisted, it is not impossible that you will be torn to pieces in an instant. So, good luck to everyone. After finishing speaking, the Major General instructor looked at Zephyr, and the other side nodded to continue, and then he shouted, Now, come and collect your life-saving charms, brats, all the weapons you carry must be handed in, you can only use what we have prepared. Standard weapon, and an extra day's worth of dry food. Some of the recruits were trembling, some were eager to try, and they queued up in an orderly manner to receive their own equipment. Loya thought for a while, took a dagger and a bag of gunpowder, but did not take a gun. The Navy who distributed the equipment gave him a surprised look and asked, "I understand daggers, but why don't you take guns if you take gunpowder? You must know that most recruits choose to take guns, so when faced with danger more protection." Loya shrugged and explained, "My strength is no longer enough to use guns, and in case of injury or rain, gunpowder is a good thing to start a fire and disinfect. By the way, Uncle, is this bag waterproof?" The uncle of the Navy nodded when he heard the words, smiled and said, "Have ambition. Don't worry, the bag made of sea animal skin, if you tie the rope around the opening a little tighter, it won't get wet even if you soak it in water." "That's it, thank you Uncle." Loya beckoned, took the smoke bombs and dry food for help, and left the warship. Ask him why he is not seasick, because he has been jumping up and down on the ice cubes in place, and his feet have not touched the deck. "Loya, let's go together." "Yeah, it'll be fine with you around." As soon as Loya got off the boat, the recruits who were familiar with him gathered around, with a pleading in their words, hoping to form a team with him. The tone was pitiful, without the slightest bit of reason. This is the world of One Piece, and there is no SPH that believes that, the stronger the ability, the greater the responsibility. After all, in this sea, strength is respected, and now facing unknown dangers, seeking the protection of the strong and showing a natural appearance is courting death. No matter how good the two are on weekdays, at this time, in this serious elite assessment, doing that is tantamount to courting death. Loya looked at his colleagues who were looking forward with a headache, and looked behind him. The big men on the warship had left the deck and went to the surveillance center. It was impossible to find someone to relieve the siege. So he sighed resignedly, spread his hands and said, "Okay, but only for one day. After a day, you must be familiar with this island and be able to independently hunt for targets. Everyone knows that it is not necessary to gather together. Might get a ticket to the elite camp." Quote. This is indeed the case. Among the recruits, there are a few who do not want to join the elite camp. After hearing what Loya said, Niu Kiba agreed. They are recruits to the headquarters and the future elite of the Navy. If they are timid now, how will they fight pirates in the future? Seeing that everyone agreed, Loya raised his fists high. "Yoshi, then let's go." Yes. On a warship, in a spacious room. This is the monitoring center of this assessment, and almost all the admirals are gathered together. On the surrounding walls were images projected by videophone bugs, and dozens of Navy officers were running around with notebooks to record the scores of the recruits. Zephyr sat at the top of the conference table and looked at the recruits' information. Suddenly, he raised his head and said helplessly to the person across the conference table, "Are you that free, Kuzan?" "Ah la la, yes. But I have to thank you, teacher, otherwise Marshal Sengoku would have already transferred me to perform the mission." Kuzan took off the blindfold in front of him and replied, "Anyway, that kid calls me teacher too. The disciple participates in the actual combat assessment. I won't be able to tell if I don't come to see it." It was only just now that Zephyr knew that Kuzan had boarded another warship as early as Malinford and accompanied him all the way here. As Kuzan said, this is really thanks to Zephyr. In order to make Loya grow up faster, Zephyr and Sengoku discussed for a long time, which made Sengoku let go and allowed Kuzan to teach Loya every day. This also caused Kuzan to have a very comfortable month, and now he has nothing to do with the actual combat assessment. Zephyr couldn't help but regret his decision. Isn't this giving Kuzan a perfect excuse to be lazy? Chapter 23 Reload the Lancers. Inedible Shigou beef. You will be able to relax for a few days now. What is it like to be idle all day long? Sengoku won't allow you to go on like this forever. Zephyr snorted and stopped looking at him. The rest of the generals on the conference table pretended not to hear, and looked up at the sky in different postures. Kuzan shrugged. He learned this move from Roha. That day, in the small square, Roha defeated Aludo. A lazy and sluggish look matched this move was maddening. Yeah, I got it. Really, the teacher is teaching again. After a pause, Kuzan pulled down his blindfold and put his hands behind his head to cushion him. However, Tomorrow I'm going to the East China Sea to perform a mission, so I'm just on the way with you guys. To the East China Sea. Is there anything there that requires a general to be dispatched? No, it's just unpleasant to see there. I want to find something to do. Zepha. I must have seen a fake Kuzan. The guy who is so lazy will take the initiative to find something to do. The sun is coming out of the west. Walking into this virgin forest, all kinds of tall trees come into view, and the aerial roots of the thickness of one arm stick out from the trunk, pull to the ground and plunge into the soil. The clumps of vines and the messy plants crawling on the ground made it more difficult for Loya and others to walk. In addition, the woods were sultry and hot, and those trapped in it would soon sweat profusely. After Loya brought people into the forest, several recruits chose to leave the team. They believed that even if they could not join the elite camp, it would be an experience. It was indeed safe to follow Loya, but it would not achieve the purpose of the assessment. Loya can only boast about aspiration, and then wish them good luck. When he came to a valley, Loya suddenly stopped. A small creek ran down the rugged rocks, smashing against the water, forming a circle of ripples. The recruits behind him stopped moving neatly, looked at him nervously, and patrolled left and right with their guns in their hands. What's wrong, Loya? Loya looked around seriously. Here. How? The scenery is good. Hey. Let's pee as a souvenir. Clang. The recruits were stunned by this unprepared show, got up and screamed, Kiba, did you make a mistake? It will scare people to death. In fact, they did think too much, and Loya just wanted to pee. This urination has been suffocating since last night, and I can't help it for a long time. Ignoring the fussing companion, Loya ran to the side of a big rock more than 2 meters high, took off his pants and started to work. Woo better. God TM is fun. The recruits lining up to pee groaned. Suddenly, a recruit whispered, Hey, do you think this stone is moving? Are you kidding me? The stone. I'm rubbing it. Hurry back, the stone is really moving. Loya just wanted to make fun of the other party, but was surprised to find that the stone was really moving. A group of people quickly stepped back, holding the gun on their back while raising their pants. Moo. The deafening roar resounded through the valley, and the big rock finished turning over, staring at Yuhi's eyes at the group of little puppies who had disturbed his nap. A Shueba recruit shouted, This is a Shigu bull with 50 points. Although it has few points, its lethality ranks among the top 10 on the island. Be careful of its horns, which are stronger than ordinary steel. 50 points. Luoya looked directly at the Shigu Niu, who had a strong desire to attack, his right hand clenched tightly, and the strong cold condensed around him. You back off, I'll come to meet it. Moo. Shigu Niu seemed to be stimulated by Loya's appearance, shook his head and roared, then lowered his head and rushed towards Loya frantically. The pair of horns cut through the air and made a whimpering sound. The gravel on the path was smashed by its foot and turned into powder, like a reloaded tuck with full horsepower. Be careful, get out of the way. Seeing that Loya was about to be hit, the recruits raised their muskets and fired. The crackling projectiles hit Shigu Niu, but these small projectiles didn't even stop the collision, and they didn't even leave a scar on the cowhide. Seeing this, the student tyrant who spoke up just now said anxiously, Hurry up and avoid Loya. The Shigu Niu has to stop before turning, it can't catch up with you. The Shigu Niu was fast and rushed in front of Loya. It seemed to have seen the scene where Loya was penetrated by its pair of horns. This is its unfavorable treasure, even the overlord of the island would not dare to provoke it easily. Dodge. No, there's no need for that. Hum. The magic power began to vibrate, and the grass and stones under his feet were instantly shaken and flew out. Loya raised his left hand seemingly casually, and stroked the horns that came from the impact. Yes, it's stroking. Apart from this word, the recruits on the sidelines didn't know how to describe Loya's actions. It's over. Loya can't escape. Just when the recruits turned their heads and couldn't bear to watch, Loya's voice broke through the noisy environment and penetrated into their ears inexplicably. Ice make reloaded lancers. Puff. There was the sound of something being torn apart. The next second, a heart-piercing scream sounded, startling them. The recruits hurriedly raised their heads, but were stunned by the scene in front of them. I saw that the Shiguniu, who was still aggressive just now, was lying on the ground and rolling frantically. Blood was thrown everywhere as it twisted, and large swaths of blood-stained yuhi's grass, leaves and streams. On Shiguniu's forehead, an ice Jinchuriki column with a diameter about the size of a fist plunged into it fiercely. Looking at the bulging skin, it actually drilled from behind Shiguniu's buttocks. Out! The conical drill bit exposed in the air was covered with the hot blood of Shiguniu, and a white mist formed above the ice cubes. Even Aludo doesn't dare to collide with me. What kind of thing are you? Loya clapped his hands and scattered the hard ice armor on his hands. Then, without looking at the wailing Shiguniu, he pointed at the scholar who was doing science popularization just now and asked, "Hey, brother, is this stuff edible?" Didn't eat morning and night, didn't eat lunch, just the standard food for a day. Loya was already hungry at this moment. Just when Loya stabbed the stone drum bowl with one blow, in the surveillance center, a Navy swallowed, looked away from the screen, and lowered his head to record Loya's record. Christopher Loya, a stone drum cow. Because the recruits, companions also fired, and the kills were not completed independently, the 50 points on Shiguniu were equally divided among several people. Seeing that Loya had killed the Shigu cow, which was famous for its rough skin and thick meat, the generals in the seats cast a surprised look at Kuzan. This Loya, it turns out that he can really use the freezing ability. Moreover, it is already so strong. Is this a gift of talent or is it better taught by General Aokiji? Although Loya's abilities are no secret in the recruit camp, for most navies, who would have nothing to know what the recruits are doing. If it weren't for the reason of Admiral Aokiji, the admirals present would probably never have heard the name Loya. Kuzan felt the gaze of others and pushed up his blindfold. Did something happen? It is impolite to talk about other people's behavior behind their backs, let alone talking about generals with higher rank than themselves. For a time, the lieutenant generals looked up at the ceiling. The weather is really nice today. Different from the focus of the lieutenant generals, Zephyr carefully observed the movement of the Shiguniu when Luoya shot, seeing that the Shiguniu was penetrated by the ice spear after it stopped moving, and nodded with satisfaction. That's true, no matter how strong the fruit ability is, you must have a strong physique to exert real power. Loya in the Deep Valley doesn't know what happened on the warship. He is now worried about other things. Pulling on Shueba's neckline, Loya spit out angrily, "What? You said this thing can't be eaten. Then what am I doing so hard?" Facing the angry Loya, Shueba was about to cry, "I really can't eat it. The outer layer of Shiguniu is full of stones, and the muscles and internal organs are highly poisonous." Seeing Shueba's appearance really wasn't a lie, Loya put him down unwillingly. Gollum. The thunder sounded in his stomach at the right time, and he performed with him. I'm starving to death. I want to eat. Let's look again, there must be animals that can be eaten on such a big island. Shueba comforted Loya with tears. Why do you have to trouble me? Is it my fault that Shigu cattle can't be eaten? At this time, Loya remembered something. No, why am I looking for it on the ground? The bushes are so dense here that we can't find animals even a few hundred meters away. Thinking of this, Loya pushed the hand of Shueba away and jumped into the sky. Since you can't find it on the ground, you can find it from the sky. The recruits had no choice but to look at him. Suddenly, Loya jumped down in surprise and pulled Shueba's neckline again. Hey, I'm asking you. There is a gorilla, about 5 meters high on its front legs, with a yuhi-colored belly and a long body. With silver, white hair. Is this thing edible? Shueba thought for a while after listening to it. It sounds like it should be a silver-backed ape. You can eat it. I remember that there is a restaurant in my hometown of Chambord that sells silver-backed ape dishes, and a serving costs 3,000 W Bailey. That's it. Loya turned and rushed into the sky, stepping on the ice cubes and leaving without looking back. Roha's speed was very fast, and no one was seen in the blink of an eye. Only then did Shueba suddenly react, that it seems that Roha has found a silver-backed great ape. Speaking of this, he swallowed hard, and looked at the others, his face instantly darkened. Loya, come back. That's something that the lieutenant generals don't want to provoke. Silverback great ape, a type of terrestrial beast. You must know that the terrestrial beasts are terrifying monsters with the same name as the sea kings. Although the silverback great ape is an ingredient, it does not mean that it will be slaughtered by others. On the contrary, it is so powerful that every successful hunt is enough to make headlines in the news. In addition, answer a message in the book review area. Of course, the ice dragon slayer can eat ice, but it is only second order now, so I said that Loya can only swallow ice cubes to restore magic power now, and he can't swallow it directly in the original book. Lower attribute attack to go berserk. After all, you can't write the scenes in the introduction in dozens of chapters, it will collapse. Chapter 24 Silver carried the great ape on his back and began to fight. But at this moment, Loya couldn't hear him anymore. He was hungry, and he turned his speed to ultimate, and approached the gorilla sitting on the hillside eating fruit at a speed that made Zephyr couldn't help but admire it. Silver Great Ape. In the surveillance room of the warship, many lieutenant generals clapped the table and stood up, nervously looking at Loya's back on the screen, and the silver-backed great ape who had noticed the enemy raising his head. Is it still alive? I remember that it lived on the island more than 10 years ago. A lieutenant general stared at the gorilla, remembering the time when he participated in the recruit assessment. That time, he was almost killed by this gorilla. Gorilla was killed. General Zephyr, order to attack. It is not an opponent that Loya can defeat. Mo looked at Zephyr anxiously. He brought Loya out of the island, and Loya was very close to the first acquaintance he met after crossing, so the relationship between the two has always been good. Zephyr didn't answer immediately, but put his eyes on Kuzan, who was sleeping soundly. Just now, he clearly saw the corners of Kuzan's mouth twitching. Although it was obscure and quickly subsided, it was still captured by him. So he asked in a deep voice, Kuzan, this time is not a training session. If you are not careful, you will die. Tell me honestly, can Roha be able to deal with that beast? Hearing Zephyr's words, Kuzan knew that he couldn't keep pretending to be asleep. Who knows? Kuzan said lazily, turning over and leaning back on the chair. Zephyr's eyes were spitting fire, as if he was going to eat people. No one is more anxious than him for the decadence of the Navy recruits in the past few years. Loya is not only an ordinary recruit, but also a disciple he has recognized, an important future force for the Navy. Kuzan's casual look simply doesn't care about Loya's life and death. You're also worthy of being his teacher. Zephyr slammed the table angrily, armament hockey wrapped around his hand at some point, and the hard iron plate was dented. The unconcealed eyes stared at Kuzan fiercely, and Zephyr's words were already filled with undisguised anger. Kuzan, answer my question. Allah, the teacher is angry. Kuzan slowly sat up straight, but immediately rested his chin lazily with his hands. Facing Zephyr's fierce eyes, Kuzan said indifferently, don't be so angry, teacher. Look, I'm not in a hurry at all. Zephyr was just about to say something, when all of a sudden a light flashed in his mind. Yes, Luoya is not only his own disciple, but also the disciple of the tall man in front of him. Although he has always refused to admit it, after a month, Kuzan has acquiesced to this title. If that's the case, why should Kuzan not be in a hurry? Unless. Thinking of this, Zephyr seemed to have a clear understanding and turned his head to look at the screen. Seeing his expression, Kuzan knew that Zephyr had understood, so he lay back in the chair and pulled off the blindfold, chuckling, looks like you finally found out, teacher. This kid Loya, although he can't get along with him. Other animal-type abilities keep transforming continuously, but once transformed, his strength is not weaker than that of the lieutenant general. If he is not weaker than the lieutenant general of the headquarters, then he already has the strength of the Lieutenant General of the headquarters. Hearing Kuzan's words, everyone looked at the screen in shock. That guy with a mediocre stature, only 175 centimeters tall, and even a very slender guy, has the strength of a lieutenant general. Not to mention domineering, he can't even know the 6 naval styles. Feeling the exclamations coming from the surroundings, I don't know why, Kuzan felt very comfortable, and his heart was filled with inexplicable pride, which was better than half a year's vacation. After a pause, Kuzan continued to explain to Zephyr that he wanted to show off now, especially in front of his teacher. Animal-type phantom fruits are rarer than natural-type fruits. Therefore, no one can tell exactly what the situation of phantom fruits is. Loya's dragon fruit, apart from the restriction that it will stun all vehicles, there's another downside. That he can't do full transformation. Because the legendary dragon's power is too powerful, it is not something he can control now. For the Master's power, he developed that move to achieve the purpose of transforming. Well, it took a lot of hard work to develop it. A move that transforms for a short time. But being able to grow to this point in just 1 month is really... At the end, Kuzan's tone was a little sighed. A month ago, when he stood still, he could destroy Roha's strongest roaring attack. And a month later, the ice bomb that Loya threw out at random could bring him a fatal threat. His melee level has also improved by leaps and bounds. Even if he is a hard ice armor, he needs to use 30% of the strength to break it. Whether it is talent, hard work or fruit development, the speed at which Loya becomes stronger makes Kuzan look at him. At this rate, Loya may have a genuine general strength before the age of 30. Kuzan said so. But that wasn't the most frustrating thing for Kuzan. In the last week, he sadly found that his frozen fruit was restrained by Loya in terms of properties. Obviously everyone is ice cubes, but it turns out to be a relationship between the top and the bottom. That is to say, even if Loya doesn't use domineering, he can attack his entity with ice. How is this game still playing? A somewhat confused Kuzan is already thinking about his retirement. The teacher is already old, and his health is getting worse every day. Maybe it will be a good choice to replace him and stay in the headquarters to train new recruits. After listening to Kuzan's words, Zephyr was silent. He still underestimated Roha. Although he would secretly take a look at the training of the two when he was free, no Kuzan knew much about Roha's actual combat power. Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters and Vice Admiral of the branch belong to 2 levels in terms of strength. Since Kuzan has used the word headquarters with certainty, even if it is a short-term outbreak, it means that Loya really has that share. Strength. At this time, the most touching feeling was a mole. He stared at Loya who was jumping forward in the air, recalling what Zephyr said to him the day Loya first joined the Navy. Destroy a pirate group with a bounty of 5,000 W in 1 move. I admit that his strength is good. But now, he is just a child, and he has a long way to go in the future. The children in Zephyr's eyes were those disciples whose strength was below the general level. Since Zephyr could say these words at that time, it meant that Loya's strength at that time could only hover between the school officials. And now. Have you grown to this point in a month? Loya, Mo said with emotion, this is really a formidable talent. Food. Loya, who was moving fast in the air, didn't know that Kuzan on the warship was showing off himself as a child from someone else's family. He only had this thought in his mind now. I want to eat. The 2 sides were hundreds of meters apart, and the silverback great ape suddenly raised his head and let out a furious roar in the direction of Loya. Roar. With its movements, the forest suddenly became lively, and countless animals looked here in panic. What happened? Why is the king of the island angry? So far away, you sensed my hostility. Not bad, but that's how it's fun to hunt. The stench came over him, and Loya opened his mouth wide and jumped into the sky. What are you? The dog is barking far away. That's what I call roaring. The roar of the ice dragon. Boom. An ice tornado with a diameter of more than 10 meters quickly formed in the air, whistling towards the silver-backed great ape. The cold air instantly froze the moisture and particles in the air, turning it into ice chips, which were wrapped in the ice tornado. Headed straight to the silverback great ape. The ice tornado was so violent, the silverback great ape suddenly felt a strong crisis. It roared, pulled up a 10-meter-high tree beside it, and threw it violently at the tornado. But how can this ordinary tree resist the unique trick of Roha's great increase in strength? When it hits the ice tornado, it is instantly swallowed up without even a bubble, turning into a large piece of ice, instead hits Silver's back, and explode. Boom! The sound of the explosion was incessant, and the resulting airflow pushed the extremely cold air out in all directions. The cold wind began to whistle, and the flowers, plants, trees, insects, fish, birds and beasts were directly frozen. A piece of pure white ice appeared in the green forest in an instant. Looking down from the sky, it looked like a green canvas with a bucket of white paint poured over it. Roar! Silverback great ape let out a scream that resounded all over the island, and was pushed by the ice tornado and wiped out a puddle dozens of meters long on the ground. On the deserted island, Kai Gugwo's law of the jungle told Loya that the first strike is stronger, and the second strike suffers, and take advantage of your illness to kill you. Without waiting for the cold wind to dissipate, Loya jumped down from the air, forming two ice blades on the soles of his feet, and approaching the center of the explosion through the ice path formed by the roar of the ice dragon. As they got closer, Loya slammed both hands and opened her palms to aim at the huge figure in the smoke. Ice make ice bomb. Burst. Call out, call out. Several bursts of air sounded, and the conical ice cubes rolled up the wind and ice debris, hitting the silverback great ape like a cannonball, and then, booming, the sound of continuous explosions resounded through the island again, even if it was on the other side of the island. On one side, you can feel the vibration of the air. This scene is like slaughtering the demon to order the cannon to wash the ground. Countless ice cubes and soil splash out, making the explosion even more lethal. What happened? What was that sound just now? Could it be that the warship was firing? In the forest, the other recruits raised their heads in surprise and turned their eyes to the depths of the dense forest. Moo! Grumpy! What? This time the forest became lively, and countless animals rushed for their lives, from a small group to a large group, and then evolved into a beast swarm. The battle took place in the territory of the king of the island, the silverback great ape, and the scream really frightened them. And most animals are afraid of noise, an instinct etched in their genes. This will hurt the recruits on the island. They are weak in strength. They may still have hope of defeating a single beast, but in the face of the beast tide, they will not be tougher than a small grass on the side of the road. Run! The beast tide is coming. Climb up a tree. They won't go up a tree. The nimble guy shouted loudly, scrambled a few times and climbed to the tree, holding the trunk and praying. Don't get knocked down, don't get knocked down. In the surveillance room of the warship, a group of Navy members stared at the surveillance video in a stunned manner, cold sweat dripping from their foreheads. Just now, it was obviously just the beasts in the range of Silver's back great ape running for their lives. Why did it become a beast swarm? Well, all ready to work, or our lovely recruits will suffer heavy casualties. Lieutenant General Mole stood up, said to the colleagues present, and then looked at Zephyr. Zephyr held Kiba Hanako and looked at Loya, who was still firing ice bombs on the screen with a headache. On the screen, Loya attacked with murderous awe while swallowing. Feeling the mole's gaze, he sighed and waved his hand. Go, go, remember to inform those people lurking on the island, the next one is the one you can save. Yes. Mole and the others saluted, pushed open the hatch, and hurried to the island. Fortunately, the assessment has just started. Except for Loya, the others are not far from the coast, and the chance of encountering life danger is not high. When the generals went out, Zephyr said to Kuzan with a strange expression, I admit that his strength growth this month is terrifying, but you didn't teach him how to avoid trouble. Kuzan's face stiffened, and he pulled down his blindfold to avoid looking at him. Chapter 25 Runaway. Loya's new form. Just as the generals on the warship were preparing to save the field, Loya stopped attacking. Not because the magic power was exhausted, but because he felt a threat. Swish. With his feet hard, Loya slid on the ice and quickly left the place. Bang! Sure enough, just as he left, a bloody fist slammed down, smashing the ice surface, and a large spider web-like pit appeared on the ground. Missing a single hit, the roaring silver-backed great ape rushed out of the smoke, raised his fist that exposed the bones, roared frantically, and lunged at Loya again. In an instant, Loya understood his victory. Silver's white and bright hair on the silverback great ape was torn in large pieces, and after the layers of skin were frozen, it was incomplete like broken glass, revealing the tender muscles underneath. Its chest has been completely frozen, and the wound is sunken to form a man-high pit, and a piece of meat was torn off by force. One eye with the eyelid disappeared, leaving only a dark void, and blood was gurgling outward. Through the ice layer on the chest of the silverback great ape, Loya could even see its internal organs and bones. Obviously, the attack just now caused the silverback great ape to suffer fatal injuries. Loya's big move, Ice Dragon Roar, plus dozens of ice bombs, even the king of this island couldn't bear it. In the face of the mad silverback great ape, Roja didn't want to be just like Aldo in everything. The cold air was overflowing, and Loya quickly formed an ice armor on the surface of the body, and then threw it sideways, rolling on the spot, dodging Silver's life-threatening blow on the back of the great ape. The waist-thick fist hit the ground hard, and the strong wind blew through, leaving a scratch on Loya's face. So fast, so strong. Luoya didn't have time to think about it. The speed and strength of the silverback great ape exceeded his expectations, and any hesitation would be fatal. In terms of strength, the silverback great ape is more than 10 times higher than Loya, whose body has grown to 20%. In terms of speed, the movement speed similar to shaving is even more hopeless. Roja, who stood firmly on the ground, raised his hand to activate his skills, but a strong sense of danger struck again. The dragon's body gave him the intuition of a beast, and he resolutely gave up the attack. Loya used his hands and feet to shoot 4 ice Jinchuriki column and quickly lifted into the air. The next second, or less than a second, the 4 ice Jinchuriki column were swept away by a hairy leg with the kneecap exposed. It was the silver-backed great ape. Seeing that it didn't hit Loya, it turned around and swept its legs and kicked it. Seeing this, Loya terminated his ability and flew upwards by inertia. He puffed out his cheeks, and the dark blue magic circle appeared in front of him again. At this moment, the great ape on the back of Silver turned around abruptly. His body was driven by inertia and broke several trees before he stopped. He bent his knees and jumped, and the iron fist representing wildness and anger charged straight towards Loya. Swiftness, fierceness, flexibility, coupled with a strong physique, these are the strengths of the silverback great ape standing on the top of this island. This series of movements was so smooth and swift, it even made Roja feel like he was facing Kuzan. He can be sure that the roar of the ice dragon can repel it, but before that, the iron fist of the silverback great ape may have already landed on him. After all, ults always require charging. On the warship, Zephyr and Kuzan, who woke up at an unknown time, watched the video in silence. Loya was in a desperate situation at the moment. His moves were simply not enough to launch before the attack of the silverback great ape. Even if he wanted to condense ice cubes and use his strength to avoid the attack, silverbacked great ape's speed would make him know what is useless. Zephyr wanted to give an order to let the lieutenant general rescue Loya first, but that was not allowed by his status as the chief instructor, and he could only clench his fists at this moment. Kuzan still looked calm and didn't feel nervous at all. My disciple, show me the new moves you've cultivated this month. Silverback great ape didn't want to provoke the lieutenant was because its melee strength was very strong, fast and powerful, and even with its size advantage, its attack was more deadly than the general lieutenant. What trump card does Loya have to make a comeback? Can't escape. This was the conclusion that Loya came to in an instant. But so what? This was the conclusion that Loya came to at the next moment. Facing the murderous attack of the great ape on the back of Silver, Loya pulled out a smile. I am not the me a month ago, the one who was knocked out by a punch. In an instant, dense blue lines appeared on his body, but unlike the ones he had used before, these magic lines were so dense that they wrapped himself up like a silkworm cocoon. Bang! The sound of real flesh hitting flesh sounded, and the silver-backed great ape punched the ice armor on Roha's body. At that moment, Loya felt as if he was hit by a high-speed train running at full speed, and the whole person was smashed into the air. A little bit of broken ice was left in the air, which was driven by the airflow and turned into a round Jinchuriki column. Boom! After Loya flew out, there was a thunderclap on the spot, and a circle of air waves violently rushed in all directions, blowing all the shards of ice on the battlefield. Silverback Great Ape landed from the air, staggered a bit, and stood firmly on his knees with his big blood-stained hands, gasping for breath. After the gorilla's victory, it did not dare to do the chest-beating action. Its chest is now seriously injured, and it was forcibly frozen by that bit of ice to save its life. Don't be killed by the enemy later, it will be funny if you hammer yourself to death. From the feeling of the fist reaction, the silverback great ape can conclude that the bones on that little guy just now snapped and broke. According to past experience, the opponent is dead at this level. Loya. Zepha's eyes met Yuhi's, and he clenched the Kiba pass. He turned to look at Kuzan, a dangerous and terrifying aura locked on Kuzan. That's what you said, don't be nervous. Ah la la, it's really not too old, teacher. Kuzan shrugged his shoulders easily. Even if Zepha looked like him, he still felt his life was in danger. However, Kuzan was not worried that Zepha would shoot him, because Loya was not dead. He paused and explained before Zepha went completely berserk. Don't worry, I've tried it, and this level of attack can't kill that kid. Is Loya dead? Of course not. Silverback Great Ape Smashed was just the second layer of ice armor on Loya's body. After the battle, the boiling blood became calm, and the body temperature began to drop. The silverback great ape turned black for a while. It knew that after the ice melted, the wound would begin to bleed. No one on the island could survive this kind of injury, and he would die soon. But just as it was about to die peacefully, a loud shout suddenly came from the sky. Ice dragons. Iron Fist. Boom. The silverback great ape, who had no time to react, was hit in the head by the sudden attack and flew out. Countless ice cubes and stones were smashed and crushed. The forest was like a drawing paper. A line was erased by a huge eraser. Come. Shaking his dazed head, the silverback great ape got up excitedly. It felt that little breath that caused fatal damage to it. He is still alive. It roared at the speeding Loya, bent its legs, and rushed over. At this time, Loya's appearance has undergone tremendous changes. His body is no longer the smooth human skin, but a precise arrangement of blue dragon scales. Pale bone spurs grew on the elbows and knees, killing intent lingering, and the nails on the hands became slender and sharp, like dragon claws. A pair of wide fleshy membranes similar to bats on the back, fluttering and rolling up the airflow to make him fly in the air. Staring at a pair of golden vertical pupils, Roha faced the silverback great ape. His current resilience and defense are not formidable. As long as the key points are not destroyed, a few broken bones will not affect the battle. Come on, who is afraid of who? Facing the silver-backed great ape rushing in, Roha roared and met it head-on. Boom. Two fists, one big and one small, collided, and a dull thunderous sound resounded through the forest. The silverback great ape took a small step back and looked at Loya in shock. Although the breath has changed a lot, this person is indeed the little one just now. In just a few dozen seconds, what happened to him? His strength became stronger than himself. Before he had time to think about it, Loya suddenly disappeared in place in front of him. Roar! Silver-backed the great ape furiously with his mouth open and roared, and punched Roha with a backhand fist. Can you still perceive my movements? Loya looked at the fist blocking his claws in surprise, and then looked at War. Then let's try who falls first. The claws left an afterimage in the air, and the strong wind from the fist hummed. Loya ripped off a piece of meat on Silver's back great ape's arm with one claw, then was hit by his fist and vomited blood and rolled out, kicking on the ground, and Loya continued to pounce without changing his face. The sound of crashing and tearing sounded alternately. The blood was scattered on the ice cubes, and Cece's was smoking white smoke, some from Loya, and some from Silverback Great Ape. Broken arm, kicked with foot, bit broken foot with Kiba, and headbutted. One person and one beast. No, the two beasts are fighting in the most primitive way without any pretense. The battle will only end if one side falls. In the surveillance room, Zephyr stared blankly at the blue figure on the screen, and the silver-colored giant ape with Yuhi died on his body. After a long time, he turned his head and asked uncertainly, "Is that Loya?" "Yes, teacher. Have you forgotten that Loya is an ice dragon fruit-capable person? As long as he develops it, his hand-to-hand combat ability is no weaker than anyone else's." "I don't care about this, okay. I'm asking why he doesn't use his freezing ability to fight, but is savage like this." Zephyr thought for a while, and figured out a savage. In this regard, Kuzan shrugged. "As I said, he doesn't have enough control over his fruit ability. Once he enters this state, Loya cannot use long-range attacks." Chapter 26 Soldier's Funeral. Is it true that Loya can't perform ranged attacks? The answer is of course impossible. Now this form has been named Shikai by Loya, who is full of slots. Over the course of a month, he gradually mastered the method of activating the power of the dragon. The magic pattern used in the previous battle with Kuzan was the initial version of this form. The reason why he named it himself is that this state is not a skill attached to the Dragon Slayer system, but developed by Roha himself. By using ice-shaped magic in his body, he made his body devour a large amount of ice-attribute magic power, thereby activating the power of dragons, breaking out dragon scales, and improving offense and defense. Just from this point of view, those Dragon Slayer wizards in Royabizi's original work are so talented that they don't know where to go. In just over 2 months, he mastered the method to actively activate the power of the dragon. Although this method is very crude, very dangerous, and has the demeanor of the bomb race goblin, and the sequelae are also very large, and the sanity will be affected by the bloodthirsty impulse. But it's really useful, isn't it? Activating the dragon power in the body will naturally not affect the use of dragon-slaying magic, but the ice modeling magic will temporarily shut down the server for maintenance due to the rampant dragon power. I understand why eggs can't be put in one basket, and Loya won't foolishly explain all his cards. In addition to the above problems, this move also has a disadvantage that is not a disadvantage, that is, the passive skill dragon power will increase very quickly. After completing this mode, Loya only used it twice, and just 2 times, the power of the dragon has been permanently increased by 1%. So if it wasn't for desperate efforts, Loya would definitely not use this trick. But the effect is remarkable. The dragon's body has soared to 39% at this moment. What is this concept? If the previous Roha still needed to avoid the counterattack in the face of the attack of the silver ape, now he can face up to it, face it head-on, and fight against the silver ape without hesitation. Even his defense and attack are even more terrifying than the silverback great ape, a real humanoid beast. The Iron Fist of the Ice Dragon. Ice Dragon's Broken Kiba. The Claws of the Ice Dragon. Ice Dragon's Grip. Punch, kick, tear. Luoya tirelessly launched attacks again and again, and his appearance was even crazier than the runaway silver-backed great ape. The snake-like vertical pupil looked up and down on the silver-backed great ape, and the icy killing intent mixed with the dragon's might. Come on, the insects in the whole forest dare not make a sound. Even if it is only a trace, this is the majesty of the dragon. Dragon, above all creatures in the world. Silverback Great Ape had long felt the majesty of Loya, and the inexplicable feeling hit its heart like a heavy hammer, and it was extremely uncomfortable. But this way it's even more exciting. The so-called eternal hardship is the only death. If any living body is not afraid of death, then what can make him fear? One person and one beast were banging against each other so bloody and violent, making a sound like a dull thunder. With the passage of time, gradually, the silverback great ape's movements became slower and slower, and the strength of each counterattack also weakened. No matter how strong the willpower is, it is impossible to violate the established rules. It has no blood to shed, and the death knell has sounded. Loya felt its mood, turned over and jumped back, standing not far from it. Just looking at each other like that, Loya suddenly regained his composure. He sighed a long time, facing the look of Silver carrying the great ape that may be the only and last pleading look in his life. He nodded seriously. You are a respected warriors, all the way. Fighting for 2 hours while dragging a heavily wounded body, I would rather die than retreat, which is moving everywhere. Silverback great ape tugged with satisfaction, the face that had lost its lips, and used that blood-stained face to force a smile. Then, it raised its fist in silence and ran to Loya trembling step by step. Loya's hands condensed more magic power than before, and the cold air gathered, and the bright blue light shone on him as if he was dominated by frost, full of majesty. Ice dragons. Iron fist. Boom. The huge body fell down, smashing the ground and splashing a circle of dust, and the silverback great ape finally died contentedly. Looking at the ice sculpture that was holding a fist-swinging posture, for some reason, at this moment, Loya suddenly lost his interest, as if he had entered the time of a sage. He lifted, Shikai, and slumped on the ground, picking up ice cubes with mud and stuffing them into his mouth. Forget it, recover some stamina later to find the prey again. Christopher Loya, kill a silverback giant ape, 1,000 points. The Navy who was in charge of statistics trembled as he recorded Loya's results crookedly in the notebook. Zephyr suddenly became quiet. He stared blankly at the figure on the screen, and immediately smiled bitterly. Kuzan, you say, after Loya joins the elite camp, what should I teach him? Teacher Zephyr. Kuzan can understand what Zephyr is thinking, but he has personally experienced the growth rate of Roha. He comforted softly. At least, Loya's melee ability is poor, and he doesn't know how to use domineering. Zephyr has taught countless disciples in his life, including the current 3 admirals of the Navy. When he was young, before that incident, facing Loya's talented penultimate disciple, it was too late for him to be happy. But at this time, Zephyr was already old, and his heart was also old. Luoya was the one who watched him grow up bit by bit. Facing such a monster, he felt powerless. Kuzan is not the type to comfort people. Not only did this sentence not have a comforting effect, it even made Zephyr even more pessimistic. Hey, look at his performance under your command this month. I'm afraid it won't take long for my old bottom to be hollowed out. By the way, how old is Loya this year? At 25, it doesn't look like it, but it is. Hearing this, Zephyr breathed a sigh of relief. It's okay, I remember you also became a lieutenant general at the age of 25. Quote. Accurately, I was 26 years old. In the second year, I participated in the Devil Slaughtering Order that destroyed O'Hara. This incident has been recorded, Teacher Zephyr. Zephyr. I can't talk today. After eating a pile of ice cubes, Loya finally felt his physical strength gradually recover. Patting the dirt on his butt, Loya moved his swollen limbs to the body of Silverback Great Ape. The fighting forest has been completely razed to the ground, and the surroundings are silent. All the creatures were scared away by the battle just now. A few animals that were too late to escape were frozen there. On the icy plain, lifelike ice sculptures shone under the sun. Colored shimmer. Loya looked at the corpse of the great ape on Silver's back and was silent for a long time. This was the first time he faced such a situation. Even though the silverback great ape knew that he would die, he did not lose his will to fight until he took his last breath. What a determined character. At that moment, Roha felt that his opponent was not a simple animal, but as a warrior. That's why he said that. The warm wind blowing from the sea caressed the tips of his hair, and Loya opened his arms and turned into 2 wings of ice that were dozens of meters long. After a brief pause, he rushed towards the corpse. Ice Dragon's wing strike. This is not to whip the corpse, but to bury the silverback great ape in this way. Boom. The thick layer of ice was fanned away, revealing the soft soil below. Wings of frost unabated, like two sharp swords, cutting into the ground and throwing tons of dirt out. The body of the silverback great ape lost its support and fell into the pit after tilting slightly, and then Loya rolled up the soil with ice wings and buried it again. Ice make ice coffin. Loya hammered with both hands, and a large piece of ice condensed in an instant, freezing the surrounding land. Doing so reduces the chances of the carcass being found by scavengers. After doing this, Loya put down his hands, stood silently for a while, covered the wound and turned to leave. His steps were unprecedentedly firm. He buried not just a respectable opponent, but his weak past self. It is foreseeable that he will encounter more such things in the future. The ending of Silverback Great Ape reminded him that in this world, death was closer to his life than ever before. Chapter 27 It's a matter of time again, Zepha's thoughts. In the woods, there is silence. Looking up, the sun is shining through the shade among the leaves, like stars twinkling in the air, a little dazzling, but very crystal and beautiful, revealing an elusive silence. Strange. When did the island become so quiet? Wandering in the forest for a long time, Loya found that the previously lively and noisy forest was now silent. Not to mention the sound of the recruits fighting, not even the chirping of insects and birds. Shikai would radiate long way out, but the scope wasn't that big, right? In Malinford, it only surrounded half of the recruit battalion, and only when the pressure was upgraded could it barely cover half of the naval headquarters. Even so, Loya has obviously forgotten that fear is contagious. The explosion at the beginning of the battle, and the subsequent long way, really only frightened the surrounding animals into panic and fled. At that time, the predators on the periphery were still having fun, but today there are so many food delivered to the door voluntarily. But after a few kills, they also started to get scared. Because these guys in front of them actually ignored the death of the same kind and the predators around them, and rushed forward with their heads suffocated. Is there something scary behind it? Is it the king of the island? These predators thought, and then slowly turned from indecision to running together. Until a beast tide is formed. I can't find anything to eat anymore, I'm going to starve to death. Loya grimaced and touched his shriveled stomach. Looking at the stones around him now, he felt that it was the same as coarse grain buns. Just as Loya frowned, Lieutenant General Mole with a mohawk hairstyle appeared in front of him. Loya's eyes lit up at that time, and immediately rushed over. Ah, what a big sausage. Gotcha. Feeling the severe pain in his head, Mole's face turned black. He grabbed Loya's foot and threw it to the ground. Who is the roast sausage? That's Lao Su's hair. Dare to fool me like this, block the name of justice, and die, bastard. After some noise, the mole reluctantly took the sword back to his waist. When he heard Kuzan's words on the boat, he didn't believe it at first, but now he believes that Loya does have the strength not weaker than the lieutenant general. Even if Roha did not use the move that General Aokiji said, but with the powerful fruit ability, Roha is enough to stand firm among the lieutenants. Sitting on the ground with his stomach covered, Loya pouted, "Cut. What are you doing? Do you know that I'm starving to death now, and you're even fighting with me? I know, you want to starve me to win without fighting. Right, do you have the face to accept such justice?" Ignoring Roha's clamor, Mole put away his sword and pointed in a direction. There is a gathering point. Due to special reasons, the assessment is temporarily cancelled. You should hurry up and gather. Special reason. Loya sneezed violently suddenly, rubbed his nose, and asked, "Ah. What special reason? Are there pirates on the island?" Mole. Loya's expression didn't seem to be fake. Mole finally felt Zepha's mood now, and sighed deeply. You just fought with the silverback great ape, scaring away the surrounding animals, and now they have evolved into beasts. The tide. For the safety of most people, the assessment has been stopped. Quote. Ah. Loya looked bewildered. on such a large island, there is a beast swarm just because of me. Otherwise. When they came to the beach, there were hundreds of recruits sitting on the ground in twos and threes, their heads downcast. Some people were still bandaged, with crutches, and their wounds were pressed and treated by the accompanying ship doctor. Ah, it's Loya, Loya is back. The ice road paved with ice spread out from the forest, and Schwebe saw Loya, who was sliding over on the ice blade at first sight. Yo, good afternoon everyone. Loya greeted shamelessly, but didn't notice the weird atmosphere around her. Then, he was swarmed to the ground by the angry recruits. Bastard, did you know that I almost died? Did you bring a cannon? Ouch, my ass, who kicked it? Loya lay on the ground blankly, blinked, and then looked at Schwebe and the others with bad intentions. Hey, you betrayed me, right? Although the assessment was forced to be suspended because of his reasons, the rest of the recruits still don't know the reason. And the only one who knew the truth, apart from the generals, were only Schwebe and others who had been with him before. So. Ice make clothes poles. Gotcha, wow. Getting up from the ground, Loya clapped his hands, moved his neck, and creaked his fists. Behind him, the recruits were lifted into the air by the coat hangers formed by the ice blocks, hanging in a string and fluttering in the wind. He walked up to Schwebe, hooked his neck and asked with a smile, so. How do you want to die? When the search and rescue navy came back, this was what they saw. With Loya as the center, the recruits formed a large circle in twos and threes, shivering and holding a group to keep warm. In the middle, Loya was throwing the dry food that he had collected into his mouth. Behind him was a big tree made of ice cubes. On the trunk, the ends of the branches of Jong Kiba, as dancing claws, the recruits were frozen and hung on the treetops. When the wind blows, there is a crisp sound of jingle bells when they hit each other. Loya. The mole didn't even think about it, and rushed out with a roar. Hearing the voice, Loya had no time to turn around before he was smashed by the mole, who appeared behind him in an instant. It's a shame to use the Navy 6. Loya rolled over and stood up, picked up the dry food and continued to nibble. Mole's mouth twitched, and then he gave up his plan to continue teaching Loya, and arranged for someone to rescue the recruits from the tree. Through the window on the warship, Zephyr looked outside with a headache. Kuzan, you said, if we start the assessment again tomorrow, do you want to get rid of him? Oh, teacher, do you want to arrange for Loya to pass directly? So you are not afraid that the recruits will have opinions? Kuzan didn't lift his head, leaning on the chair holding the back of his head. I think the odds of that are very small. Glancing around the beach, Zephyr sighed. The quality of the recruits this year was really bad. Loya beat more than half of the recruits to the ground with just his personal power, without taking a breath. Kuzan didn't say anything to this, turned over and continued to sleep. You decide. Anyway, the elite camp is the teacher who teaches you alone. Zephyr's eyes flashed, his eyes rolled, suddenly the corners of his mouth rose, and he laughed out loud. Hey, I suddenly have a great idea. The rescue was over and the situation was reported to Zephyr. The good news is that no one died in this beast tide, and they all came back alive. The bad news is that several of them were seriously injured and could not participate in the assessment that resumes tomorrow, so they had to be eliminated. This is also impossible. After all, it is a medium-sized island. Even if there are patrol personnel who entered in advance, all the generals will attack at full speed after the incident, and it is impossible to rescue everyone at the first time. Among the unlucky guys, some had their legs broken by the beast tide, some were knocked unconscious during the battle, and one accidentally fell into the quagmire and was bitten to death by the animals in the quagmire. But no matter what, Loya said that he would not take the blame. Standing on the deck, Zephyr looked down at the recruits neatly arranged on the beach. In front of the queue of recruits, several lieutenant generals and the instructors of their respective teams looked at them seriously. The scene quickly quieted down. Zephyr cleared his throat and said, I think everyone already knows that due to some force majeure, today's assessment was forced to be suspended. But it doesn't mean that the assessment is over. Starting tomorrow, you will continue to conduct the assessment. The time is still 3 days. The rules remain unchanged. Do you understand? The recruits roared imposingly and neatly. Understood. Very good. Zephyr nodded in satisfaction. At least a little bit passable. The fighting spirit of this new recruit is really good. After a pause, he continued. At the same time, after many considerations, now I make a decision. The 7th team, Christopher Loya. 2. DQ. Yes. Loya buckled his face and moved out of the queue. What was this creepy feeling? Why do I always feel like I'm done? In addition, answer the comments about the book friend Yishiantiankai. How should I put it? My outline of this pit is scheduled to be filled out in chapters 3437. Since you have left a message, I will probably spoil it. Loya, S. Shikai, uses modeling magic in the body to absorb the magic of the ice attribute, thereby activating the power of the dragon, not a simple change of magic. As you said, with this kind of homegrown, a term that reminds me of the world of a 17-year-old girl, the total amount of magic doesn't change. But in this process, the power of the dragon that was activated incidentally, that is, Loya's passive skill, was the reason for the transformation. These will be explained in later chapters, the relationship between dragon power and Loya, the development and extension of dragon power. After all, there are so many dark skill icons. Moreover, Loya has just turned from a small clerk into a dragon slayer magician, and the dragon slayer magic needs to cross the river by feeling the stones. The pace is not too fast. Chapter 28 Night Talk between Master and Apprentice, Zephyr's story. After waiting for Loya to stand at the front of the team, Zephyr continued. Now, I have decided that in order to avoid another accident, Loya will stop participating in tomorrow's assessment. But to be fair, he has to accept the challenge of all recruits before he can join the elite battalion. Speaking of this, Zephyr's old face showed a cheerful smile. Do you understand? Understand. At this moment, the recruits at the bottom of the headquarters and the former General Zephyr at the top reached a tacit consensus. Aren't you very good at fighting? Come on, gang fight, we beat you, who is afraid of who? Feeling the malicious gazes coming from all directions, Loya said, I have a saying that MMP doesn't know whether to say it or not. This TM is also called, for the sake of fairness. Do you dare to say that it is not a deliberate revenge for personal gain? Wasn't that just letting Aldo steal 2 boxes of cigars from you? As for no. At night, Loya leaned against the outer wall of the igloo and made a bonfire. Puff. A drop of grease splashed on the firewood, and a spark was lightly blown up. Loya took a breath, got up, and picked up the unknown sea fish standing by the bonfire. Sprinkle a thin layer of salt and pepper, and greedily inhale the aroma. Well, the heat is just right. There is enough food on the warship, but this time it is an actual combat assessment, and survival in the wild is also a test that recruits need to do. The recruits need to solve the problem of food and accommodation on their own. Otherwise, why is the 3-day assessment only given 1 day of dry food? The bright moon cast a hazy halo on the sea, swaying gently with the waves. The oncoming sea breeze caressed the cheeks, brushing away the fatigue of the day. On the beach and among the trees, the recruits sat around the bonfire in groups of 3 and 5, quietly preparing dinner. Loya's small igloo has attracted a lot of attention. On this desert island where the cold wind is whizzing, how comfortable it would be to have such an igloo sheltering from the wind and cold. But when he thought about the day, everyone was so angry with Kiba that no one wanted to curry favor with him. Loya is also happy to relax, otherwise the big bear frozen outside the house is not enough to entertain so many people. That was the supper he prepared for himself. Just as Loya was eating grilled fish, a tall figure came outside the igloo. Without saying hello, Kuzan's hand was like cutting butter with a hot knife, effortlessly inserted it into the ice cube, and cut most of the wall directly. Randomly throwing the cut ice cubes into the sea, Kuzan looked at Loya behind the wall with the eyes of the dead fish. What? You're surprised to see me? No, Loya shook his head. I'm feeling sad. I just started demolishing other people's houses without saying hello. Teacher Kuzan, did you do the demolition before? Kuzan. The tantalizing aroma of the grilled fish by the bonfire. Loya pulled out a wooden stick and handed it to Kuzan. Come and try, Mr. Kuzan, the exclusive secret recipe. If it was someone else, Kuzan might have already taken it, but facing Loya, he was hesitant. You didn't put a laxative on it, did you? Loya was so angry, she pulled back her hand decisively, gnawed the grilled fish until only the spine was left, and said angrily, don't eat it. Let's be fair, Mr. Kuzan, you say I am the kind of shameless Loya. People. Kuzan, I can't tell. Last time you put laxatives in the water tank, and the recruits had to stretch their stomachs for a day. The reason was that the laxatives in the infirmary were about to expire and they didn't want to waste them. Loya. People who don't know how to chat are like this, and they will die in a few words. After eating all the grilled fish, Loya grabbed a piece of ice from the igloo to quench his thirst. Then Mr. Kuzan, do you have anything to do with me? No big deal. Kuzan leaned against the ice wall and looked at the sea with deep and long eyes. It was only today that I suddenly realized. Teacher Zephyr is really old. The chewing movement in Loya's mouth slowed down, and Kuzan's words evoked his memory. Indeed, Zephyr in this era is already old. From the original point of view, Zephyr's life has been a tragic performance. He worshipped heroes since he was a child, grew up to become a navy, fought countless pirates in his life, but never killed any enemy, and was known as the general who does not kill. However, it was such a good man who was still revenged by the vicious pirates, and his wife and son were brutally murdered. This is also the reason why Zephyr became the chief instructor of the recruits. Frustrated, he chose to stay in the navy after being retained by Sengoku. However, more than 20 years later, another disaster struck. When the trainee ship he led was attacked by Edward Wable, only 2 of the students on the ship survived, and one of his hands was cut off by the other party. A beloved student dies in front of him, and he can't do anything about it. Loya didn't know how Zephyr survived in the first place, maybe it was because of hatred. The cruel reality has changed the old man, and the current Zephyr may no longer be the person he once was. When Zephyr's arm was fitted with a shredder, he was completely on the road to revenge. The first is to form a pirate guerrilla team, to hunt pirates and break his oath of not killing. Later, when the Navy recruited Shichibukai, I learned that Edward Wable, the pirate who killed his student and cut off his hand, joined Shichibukai. At this time, Zephyr has completely fallen into extremes, or it is just powerless resistance. He resolutely defected from the Navy and formed an organization called Neo-Navy, in the New World, with the purpose of annihilating the pirates all over the world. In the end, the 74-year-old Zephyr died at the hands of his disciple Kizaru, and was buried by Kuzan on the island where he died in battle. Wait. Luoya suddenly felt a chill in his heart, like Conan's brain. The current time point is 1516 of the Haiyuan calendar, and Zephyr died 2 years after the War on the Top, so according to the time, it should be 1522. Zephyr was 74 years old at the time, that is to say, Zephyr is 68 now. And Zephyr formed a pirate guerrilla when he was 70 years old to hunt pirates. This time is 2 years later. In the past few years, Zephyr has been hit hard, and he is still teaching new recruits in the boot camp. So the question is, why did he change so much after 2 years, and why did he choose revenge after 2 years? The shredder hasn't been built yet. Maybe that's one of the reasons, but Loya has a bold idea in his heart. The reason why Zephyr dragged his old body to form a guerrilla team is probably because the recruits in these sessions are unbearable. He left a feeling of hopelessness in his heart, hopeless for revenge. So I decided to go out in person, hoping to get revenge before I completely grow old. Think about it, Zephyr has taught 3 generals and a number of lieutenant generals. Right now, with these parallel imports from the boot camp, even Loya, who has no knowledge, can guarantee that he will linger around the school officials for a lifetime without incident, and at most a branch lieutenant will be in the sky. The so-called backbone, on the other hand, also represents mediocrity. Relying on these disciples, trying to defeat Edward Wabel is nothing but a dream. That being the case, then. Loya swallowed the ice cube, leaned on the other side like Kuzan, and asked casually, "Yes, General Zephyr, he is 68 this year." "Teacher Kuzan, do you think General Zephyr will seek revenge for that pirate in the future?" In the previous month, Loya pretended to be curious and asked Kuzan about Zephyr's prosthetic limb, so it is not surprising that Loya said this to Kuzan. Kuzan squinted his eyes and glanced at Loya calmly, and said in a deep voice, "Listen to Loya, no matter what Teacher Zephyr does, it is his own choice, and no one can interfere." Loya's scalp was numb when he was seen, and his heart was condensed. "Okay, Mr. Kuzan." That icy murderous aura was fleeting. Loya was a smart person, and Kuzan was too. Laziness was not stupid. Both of them were ghosts and ghosts. Loya sighed in his heart. Sure enough, Kuzan has already noticed something, and now he is warning me not to walk in muddy water. If that's the case, then why don't you stop him, Mr. Kuzan? The two were silent like this. After a long time, Kuzan stood up to say goodbye. "By the way, boy, the assessment is over, and the recruits will have a week off. At that time, you will have to accept the challenge of the whole battalion, so prepare well. Next, I will go to going to the East China Sea. Don't slack off in your cultivation during this time." Quote. "Yes, Teacher Kuzan." Loya waved goodbye, and when he saw Kuzan walking away, he suddenly widened his eyes and shouted, "Hey! General Ouchi, wouldn't you consider compensating for the demolition of my house? Even if you don't compensate, you can repair it." Kuzan. Ice Age. Wow. Frost is flying all over the sky. Luya's house has been repaired, but it is solid. Chapter 29 Dream. Is it the strongest in the world? The next day, the reorganized recruits embarked on the journey again. In everyone's mind, Loya is already a member of the elite battalion by default, but it does not mean that he has taken away the qualifications of others. As Kuzan said, the top 3 are promising to join the elite camp. The so-called hope here is of course the strength shown in the assessment. Instead of the fixed top 3 passing, what should be done is to work hard. Lying on the shore board, Loya held a dog's tail flower in his mouth and took a nap with his hands on the back of his head. After arranging the supply of recruits, Mole hesitated for a while and walked towards Loya. Hearing the sound of rustling footsteps getting closer, Loya opened his eyes. "Lieutenant General Mole, I had someone put the photos in a file bag and sent them to you. Don't disturb my sleep." Joke. Yesterday inexplicably hit me, or twice. Loya won't give Mole a good look. The latter was still a little tangled, but when he heard this, he suddenly became angry and said with a stare, "As I said before, I will help you to plead for Teacher Zephyr, and you give me the photo. The result, you give I only have 1. Don't think I forgot, when you threatened me there were 3. Cut. Why do you remember it so clearly?" Loya murmured dissatisfied, and then quickly surrendered before the mole broke out. Okay, I'll give you the rest of the photos when I go back." Really, a lot of age still cares about things like this. Mole. A shameless statement. After a pause, Mole suddenly sat down next to Loya. Loya glanced at him sideways, waiting for him to take the initiative to speak. Once this person has something on his mind, his aura will change. The characteristics of the dragon's body allow Loya to feel the change of the aura on the mole very keenly. For a while, the quietness on the coast could only hear the sound of the waves lapping. As for the screams that come from the forest behind him from time to time, just ignore it. Probably unable to bear the silence, Mole spoke for a long time. "Hello, Loya, do you have any dreams?" This question is very literary, and Loya seems to see the picture of the mole teacher turning around. Shaking his head and throwing this weird idea away, Loya looked at him strangely. "Dream? Why ask this?" "Well, just talk about it, you can talk about it." Mole did not answer directly, but urged Loya. Loya is a little strange. Mo usually doesn't show the appearance of this chicken soup mentor. But after all, people are separated from each other, and he doesn't know what happened. However, Mo's words loosened Loya's dusty memory. He thought that he had forgotten the mediocre life before transmigration, but Mo's words reminded him of the ordinary daily life in the past. Loya said with a hint of sadness in his eyes, a little intoxicated. Dream is something that everyone has, and there are more than one. It's just that as life goes on, some dreams are getting closer and closer to us, while others are getting farther and farther. A picture appeared in front of Loya's eyes. On a thunderstorm afternoon, Loya, who was still in elementary school, played crazy outside for a day and didn't go to class. It rained and had to run home helplessly. He was naturally greeted by mixed doubles. I want to go home. This was Loya's dream when she was living on a desert island. But it is this innocent dream like a child, but it is so elusive. After a pause, Loya said, in the past, my dream was to eat and wear warmly and have fun. I don't have to rush for life every day. What kind of life I lived. At that time, I thought that my life would be complete by eating steak every day, living in a big house, and having a servant to take care of my food and clothing. Quote. Speaking of this, Loya asked self-deprecatingly, isn't it very promising? Mo nodded solemnly, yes. Loya. Forget it, since we opened the chatter, let's ignore what he just said. Loya said to himself, I don't have too many plans for my life. What I said just now was really my dream. But life is really full of unknowns. Loya remembered the life of a commoner once. Busy every day, elementary school, junior high school, university, I am addicted to learning and cannot extricate myself. When he was in junior high school, he had a crush on a girl, and after he confessed, he was beaten by the other's boyfriend. At that time, the confused Loya understood the unknownness of life for the first time. During the college entrance examination, his goal was a key university in another province, but the result was a few points lower. Due to economic conditions, he did not choose to repeat his studies and came to an ordinary university in the city. This is the second time. And then, as a civil engineering graduate, after graduating from university, I became a marketer. This is the third time. Thinking of these Loya is funny. Does he have a dream? Of course he has. He wants that girl to be his girlfriend. He wants to be admitted to a major university. He wants to make a difference in the construction industry. But what's the point? As a result, everything seems to be planned, and God is so joking. What can he do? It's like when he crossed this time, your passers-by would wear it in a group with instant noodles. Can you expect? Smiling, Loya continued, but now, my dreams are not those anymore. I have new goals. The mole raised his head when he heard the words, what is it? I want to be the strongest in the world. Loya raised his fist to the sky and spread his fingers as if to hold the blue sky in his hand. Since I have gained this power, mediocrity will be far away from me. From now on, I will fight for this goal. No, dream, this is my dream. Become the strongest in the world. Mo murmured, repeating Loya's words, looking at the confident smiling face of the young man in front of him. He couldn't help shaking his head. Your dream is really lofty. I thought you would say something like implementing naval justice. Do you really think the Navy is righteous? Vice Admiral Mo. At this time, Loya's cold voice came. Mo was startled, frowned and asked, Loya, what do you mean by that? Don't forget that you are a Navy. I know, of course I know. Loya didn't seem to see Mo's black face. But Lieutenant General Mo, what is justice? You should be familiar with the saying that justice will win. But you know what? The so-called justice in this world represents the justice of the victors. This is a very simple question of order. Victory comes first, then justice. You want to say that the Navy is not just, it's just a victor. Loya's words were messed up, and Mo clenched his brows and spoke slowly. Well, who knows? Just like Schrodinger's cat, That cat is always on the verge of life and death until the jar is opened. So for now, let's call ourselves the Righteous Navy. Oh, by the way, you definitely don't know Schrödinger, but you just need to know that he is a cat abuse maniac, and you can just kill him when you meet him. Having said that, Loya stood up, patted the dust on his buttocks, and prepared to go to lunch. The mole stayed where he was, looking out at the sea, wondering what he was thinking. Under the sleeve of his suit, a black phone bug clicked and fell asleep. In the command room of the warship, Zephyr stood up and looked at the sea through the window. So, do you think the same as me, Loya? Dong dong dong. The knock on the door awakened Zephyr. He sat back behind the desk and said solemnly, "Come in." It was Kuzan, who had come to say goodbye to Zephyr. "Go southeast from here and you'll be able to reach the East China Sea." Kuzan sat opposite Zephyr with Erlang's legs crossed. "By the way, teacher, do you want me to bring you some specialties? Aren't you waiting for Loya to complete the assessment? You know I've given him a big problem." "No need, I have taught him everything that I can teach him, and I believe he can handle it. Next, he needs to go his own way, which is not something I am good at." Speaking of this, Kuzan opened his eyes and looked at Zephyr. "In the days to come, please be more attentive, teacher. Don't worry, I'll teach him to be an admiral equal to yours." "Ah la la, that's just right, when the general really doesn't even have time to sleep at all, he's too busy to die." End of chapter. Chapter 30 results announced. Time is fleeting. 3 days later, on the coast of the island. The horn sounded for a while as the representative assessment ended, and the recruits slowly gathered on the coast. They are more or less adorned with colors, and some require the help of others to stand firm. The horn of the assembly was still ringing, and recruits came out of the forest one after another. "Hey, how many points did you get?" I don't know many animals." While the assembled recruits talked, they secretly looked at Loya at the front. The venue where Loya and Silver fought the Great Ape that day was discovered the next morning, and the news spread quickly. Some recruits learned the news and even gave up their goals and went there to observe it first. Those hundreds of meters of scratches left unsightly scars on the forest. Everything around was frozen. It was clearly Shao Island, but it made people feel as cold as East Island. Countless animals and insects that were too late to avoid kept their postures and turned into ice sculptures. The scene is so beautiful and it makes people feel so terrifying. Frozen hell. It was the only adjective the recruits could think of. But then it became the camp for most of the recruits, who would return to camp here at mealtimes and during breaks. Whether it was the dragon's might emanating from Loya's Shikai, or the breath left by the silver-backed great ape before his death, the animals on the island did not dare to approach this place, and they couldn't even hear the chirping of insects. Don't worry about being attacked by wild beasts at night. Is there a better place to rest in the forest than this? Obviously it was an actual combat assessment, but most of the recruits did it like this, and it was like a group outing. It's terrifying. Are we really going to fight that guy? Thinking of Zephyr's words, the recruits always felt as if they had been fooled. At that time, everyone was gloating about preparing to clean up Loya, but judging from the strength that Loya has shown so far, why are they all serving food? Probably. No problem, right? I heard that it is a one-on-one wheel battle, and grinding can grind him to death. Someone explained, but he didn't really believe himself. No, I heard it's a group battle. If it's one-on-one, I'm afraid we won't be able to hold on before Loya gets tired. He's an animal fruit person. The recruits who spoke before were speechless. This situation is indeed very possible. Although at sea, fauna fruits are considered the weakest of the category. But it is undeniable that in terms of durability, the other two series can't keep up. And looking at Loya's performance in training, the name of the boot camp's physical fitness is not blown out. Loya stood at the front of the team board, thinking about his barbecue. The assembly horn sounded, and all the soldiers assembled immediately. He did not dare to disobey the military order to continue his barbecue business. Mole and other generals stood in front of him, and they all cast a surprised and friendly look at him. They have also seen the battlefield. The scratches on the claws, the potholes as large as one person, the collapsed thick trees, and the Madara blood on the ice all proved how fierce the battle was at that time. Although the movement made by Roha was a bit big, and the assessment was even forced to be suspended for a day, they had to admit that Roha already had the strength to match them. Even in terms of destructiveness, among the lieutenant generals present, only the powerful lieutenant generals of the headquarters can catch up. It would be terrifying if he could stay that way at all times. Many lieutenant generals thought in their hearts that they didn't see the last battle between Roha and the silverback great ape, but after a little inquiries about this incident, they knew that Roha's explosive big move could greatly improve his strength and speed. After all, when this move was developed, Loya did not hide behind people. For example, several elite camp members who often practice in the small square even watched Loya succeed step by step. With the dragon fruit of the phantom beast species, plus this growth rate, as long as Luoya is not in the middle of the road, commonly known as premature death, it is appropriate to surpass them in the future. No matter how bad it was, as long as he stabilized his strength to fight the great ape with Silver's back, a lieutenant general would not be able to run away. With these conditions, the lieutenant generals will naturally show goodwill to Loya, and will no longer regard each other as a recruit. Op world, where the fist is big can be respected. Soon, half a day passed. The patrol team carried the last group of recruits out of the forest and sent them to the infirmary. A school official ran to Zepha's side and saluted, "Report to the chief instructor. All the members are assembled." "Yeah," Zepha nodded and took the report from the colonel. The first page is the statistics of the battle. In this assessment, 75 recruits were seriously injured, ignoring minor injuries. Almost all of them were injured more or less. Fortunately, no one lost their lives. Zepha glanced at it roughly and didn't pay attention, picked up the second one and observed it carefully. This is the result of the statistics. Through this, you can basically know the strength of this recruit. However, that result made Zepha sigh for a while. He waved his hand and arranged to go on. After the final results are counted, they will be announced directly. Yes. The school official took the report and trotted away. Zepha stood on the deck, his eyes locked on Loya, who was standing still, with no expression of joy or anger. Is the new navy already so weak? After more than half an hour, the final review of the record was completed. There was a sound of footsteps ahead, and the recruits quickly held their heads high, without looking sideways, ready to welcome this important moment. The leading Major General Instructor first saluted the Lieutenant General, and then faced the recruit with a solemn face. "Take a break. Stand at attention. Following, your assessment results at the moment will be announced. Everyone has it. The first 4 rows, squat down." Wow! The sound of neat footsteps sounded, and the 4 front rows of the phalanx immediately squatted down. Upon seeing this, the Major General nodded with satisfaction, and asked the officers behind him to turn on the projector and cast the image on the long-drawn curtain. Hum. The phone bug hummed and began to work, and images appeared on the curtain. The recruits held their breath nervously, searching for their names on it. After seeing their results, some people were overjoyed, while others bit their lips. Loya is the same as them, but he is looking for the first place. Soon, he found the target at the very top. Tony Mill, score 1795, place, first. 1795 points. This score is already inhumanly terrifying for most recruits. You must know that the Shigukao that Loya met, who couldn't even pierce the skin with a musket, was only worth 50 points. Ordinary recruits encounter Shigu Niu. I am afraid it is too late to run, let alone turn it into their own points. And this guy named Tony Mir had to hunt more than 30 Shigu cattle in 3 days to get this result. This person, Loya, has a bit of an impression. He is the first in the 3rd team. Before joining the Navy, he was the curator of a kendo on a small island. He heard that the town was destroyed by the pirates, and he joined the Navy for revenge. He was very belligerent. After he was unwilling, he picked off the former chief of the third team from the first day and became the new first. After that, he stood firmly in that position, and no one could shake it. But even so, Loya shares the same opinion as Zepha, it's just too weak. You must know that the first recruits in the past are some real monsters. Tony is indeed very strong among the recruits, but compared with the previous years, it is not a little bit worse. Loya once quietly asked Zepha how many points Kuzan scored in the assessment that year. The answer shocked him, and he had to keep sighing that the fruit of the nature department was indeed a natural department and had unique advantages. Chapter 31 Elite Recruit. Book friends in love with the gods for the reward, thank you. By the way, what's the point of reading? I'm really old, and I can't read my books clearly or say anything, and I don't even know anything about the rewards. I must be a fake author. The above are the results of all the staff in this assessment. The voice of the Major General's instructor echoed on the coast. I will announce the candidates who have passed the elite assessment at this moment. The recruits were refreshed and waited with breathless concentration. Even if this is not their turn, everyone loves 8 trigrams and wonders how many people will enter the elite camp this year. According to rumors, some good people even opened the market, and after training every day, they hid in the toilet like a thief to bet. Those who do not know will be put on sacks and knocked unconscious as soon as they enter. Loya said, I said it wasn't me, do you believe it? First place, Tony Mill, out. Yes. After a while, the crowd quieted down quickly. As the first place, and obtained a high score of 1795, it is strange that they could not enter the elite camp. Tony is a young man who looks very mature. Probably because of the tragedy of his family's destruction, his eyes will always have an indelible bleak and sadness. There is a knife scar from his forehead to his left face, which is the scar left by the pirates when he was protecting the town. Tony, who stood up from the team, looked straight at Loya, the sword in his hand was tightly clenched. First place. It's because that guy didn't participate. Loya felt his gaze, turned around in surprise, and then showed a sunny smile. It was not until he saw the latter twisting his head that Loya sighed in relief. As a member of the elite battalion, you will not be restricted by so many rules and regulations of the recruit battalion, and you can challenge anytime, anywhere. Tony's character is very good and strong, and the daily life after entering the elite camp can be imagined. For this kind of guy who likes to find someone to challenge him when he has nothing to do, let him not say it first. The most important point is that, even if you win against him, Loya can't even increase his energy value by 10. It's a complete waste of time. The Major General instructor ignored the interaction between the two and continued to read. Second place, Laurent Mini, out. Whoa. The team was really lively. Mini, isn't she just over 800 points? Yeah, why is the limit so low? What a joke. Shady. The recruits talked a lot and looked at Laurent Mini with different expressions. The addition of Tony can still convince the public, but Mini has also joined the elite camp, which makes everyone very puzzled. The difference of nearly double the points can also be used in the elite camp. A blonde Yangma walked out from the 7th team where Loya was, which made Loya feel a little bit of surprise. Laurent Mini, a native of the North Sea, is good at kicking and performs well in training. It stands to reason that this kind of assessment of killing targets to earn points should not be so good at it. But not only did she finish second, she also managed to join the elite battalion. At this moment, Loya and the rest of the recruits have the same idea. Why is this? However, when he saw the shoes under Mini's feet, he knew Akatsuki why. The pair of sturdy sea animal leather shoes was now stained with blood, and was tattered everywhere. The rough edges were turned upside down, and even the toes were exposed. This is a special sea animal leather shoe, designed for those who are good at kicking skills, with 100-year-old shop quality 3-packs. The blood and sweat behind this pair of sturdy leather shoes is self-evident. A hard-working genius. Loya commented in the words describing a certain watermelon head. The instructors still ignored the discussion of the recruits. These quotas were proposed by Zephyr and were decided by all the instructors through voting, and they would not be mixed with any water. Being able to get the approval of more than half of the instructors is enough to prove Minnie's strength. But it's not over yet. The instructor continued to speak under everyone's puzzled expressions. Third place, Simon Dennis Weston, out. Simon is a famous soldier in the boot camp. Since his grandfather's generation, his family has been in the Navy for generations. He has been fascinated by his eyes and ears since he was a child, and he longed to be the pride of the family. Although he worked hard to practice swordsmanship and taijutsu since he was a child, he was congenitally sick. Not to mention. The only thing worth mentioning is that he is a devil fruit power user. Hearing Simon's name, everyone stopped talking. It's not that he is afraid of the prestige of the prince's family of the N-Generation Army. Anyway, his family doesn't have much prestige, but because Simon is a devil fruit person. No matter which session, as long as the fruit ability is not too bad, they can successfully join the elite camp. After all, no one can determine the upper limit of a capable person. What's more, Simon is still one of the best snipers in this year's recruits, and he is very capable even if he doesn't rely on fruit. The recruits were happy and worried about the announced results, and after the disbandment, they boarded the ship and prepared to return to the headquarters. After arranging the wounded to board the boat, Mo suddenly found that there was still a person on the shore who had not come on board, and he was immediately happy when he took a closer look. Yo, Loya, why didn't you get on the boat? The boat will be sailing after a while, do you want to swim back? In his eyes, Loya is a devil fruit capable person, and he will be paralyzed as soon as he touches the sea. The maliciousness of saying this is obvious. For this kind of guy who took advantage of the danger, Loya responded with an ice spear attack. He was chewing on the almost burnt pork chops, and sighed in his heart, hey. Mistake. I know that Simon can get in if he exceeds the 8th floor, but I even adjusted the odds so high, my Bailey. Is it strange that those who engage in the market will engage in casinos? Not surprising. Plus, he wanted to swim back, but he definitely wouldn't. The reason is not that he is afraid of exposure. He is not afraid that the situation of seawater and sea tower will be known to Akatsuki one day. The real reason is because this is the windless belt. The lair of various sea kings. At some point, a superlarge sea king will come out. If it is swallowed in one bite, it will be fatal. Without him, Roha tried it, and he could faint and vomit when he was carried on his back, and he was only immune to the items created by his own modeling magic. But not to mention the question of whether the magic power is sufficient, just those sea kings are enough for him to drink a pot. He's not Kuzan, who dares to ride a bicycle across the sea. Since even people are considered means of transportation, let alone staying in the belly of a sea king. The confusion has been digested and cleaned up, and after death, it will be shameful, and it will be listed on the Navy's mental retardation rankings. Mo easily dodged the attack, moved over with a shaver, and hooked Loya's neck. Well, I'll knock you out after boarding the ship. Anyway, the warship is fast, and it can reach Marineford at night. Much. Hee. Loya looked at him with contempt. Are you sure you can still punch me for a long time now? Even if the dragon scales are not exposed, just by activating the blue dragon pattern, Loya's defense and anti-strike ability are already terrifying. Aluda once commented that the defense of Luo Yagwang theory in this state has surpassed that of most elite battalion members, and his body's resistance to blows is only a little weaker than his own. Seeing Loyana's undisguised contempt, Mo wrinkled a cross on his forehead, ready to teach him a lesson. Suddenly, a figure suddenly appeared behind the two of them, hitting them on the head twice. The two people who were in pain quickly separated and put on a defensive posture. But seeing that touch of purple style, he immediately straightened his waist and saluted. Teacher Zephyr. The person who came was Zephyr. Although he was defeated by Luffy in the original book, he was already 75 years old at that time, and he even needed to take medicine from time to time to maintain his combat effectiveness. In addition to missing a hand, the current Zephyr is still on the verge of his peak, teaching them both like playing. What are you doing? Don't you know the boat is about to set off? Now, get out of here right away. Zephyr's body exuded black energy, and a pair of tiger eyes were not angry. In the face of the angry Zephyr, no one wanted to get in trouble, and the two trot neatly and boarded the warship. Slap. As soon as his feet stepped on the deck, Loya slammed onto the ground with a face, and his stomach was churning for a while. Zephyr took a deep breath, didn't look at him, and ordered, "Let the boat go." Woo. The leading warship received the order, raised a long siren, and slowly sailed away from the coast. The warships lined up behind turned their bows and followed neatly. A recruit from the other team ran to Loya's side, poked his hand, and said in surprise, "Hey. It's true. It turns out that Loya is really seasick." The eyes of the surrounding recruits lit up and asked Zephyr, "Chief Instructor Zephyr, can the assessment be conducted on board in a week's time?" "Loya, you're dead. Zephyr, get out of here." Saying that, Zephyr lifted Loya up from the ground and smashed it into the air with a fist. The latter slammed into the cabin with a thud, leaving a clear mark on the hard iron plate, and passed out with a satisfied smile on his face. The people around felt a chill. Isn't Loya awakening some strange attribute? At the end of the chapter, thank you for pausing, because in the assistant code on the mobile phone, I didn't even know where I wrote it. Not surprisingly, the second update is added. Chapter 32 Freeze Time. 3,000 words for collection and recommendation. Back in Malanford, it was late at night. In his single-person dormitory, Loya muttered softly while giving himself medicine. "Cut, it's not a good thing, knowing that I'm seasick, but I still have such a heavy hand." After taking the medicine, Loya ate the roast suckling pig brought to him by Ms. S, while thinking and summarizing his experience. Through the battle with the silverback great ape, Loya discovered a lot of problems. In addition to the unavoidable topic of Wong Bakwan in melee combat, it is not easy to use magic power. He found himself incapable of using magic, whether it was beginning to gather or finally showing. Even though he has developed powerful killing moves such as Ice Coffin, Ice Bomb, and Orochi, those are all simple applications, or giving orders to the system. For example, he imitated the Ice Coffin developed by Gray's absolute freezing technique. As long as he held this idea, the ice cubes he made would be cooler and harder than usual, but the formation of magic was not interfered by his subjective consciousness. Everything is so natural. The only thing he took the initiative to do was to inject the magic power into it at a faster speed, which enhanced the presentation speed and intensity of the magic. Everything was done with the help of the system, and he didn't even know how it was done. And once it is issued, it cannot be cancelled, just like playing a game. Loya thought like this. The system clearly despises me living in the age of technology. I belong to a magic idiot. But through that battle, Loya, who consumed a lot of magic power, caught a glimpse of the feeling. This kind of understanding can let him get rid of the status quo and reach the point where he can truly retract. In addition, there is the Shikai move, the principle of which is simply that it is necessary to purify fire after a major tonic. As long as the dragon's power activated by the frost is restored, this state will be lifted without his control. These problems may not be a problem before he is still hovering between the Navy Recruit Battalion and the Elite Battalion and officially sets foot on the stage of the sea, but for a real strong man, he can see through it at a glance. As Kuzan said, learning to control power is always easier than gaining power. This will be a long process, which requires Loya to ponder and study repeatedly. Silently reciting the golden finger, Loya opened the system that brought him this power. Name, Christopher Loya. Energy stage, 2nd and 5th layers. Energy value, 900/900. Mana, 6,000/6,000. Mana recovery speed, 550 per minute. Dragon power, 0.06%. Dragon power can increase the strength of Dragon Slayer's Dragon Slayer magic, but more than 30% of his body begins to transform, and after more than 90%, Dragon Slayer's body begins to transform into a dragon. Dragon body, 22/100%. The body gradually adapts to the degree of dragon power, improves the all-round quality of Dragon Slayer wizards, can temporarily improve the degree of adaptation by swallowing energy, and the sequelae are relatively large. Moves: Ice Dragon's Roar, Ice Dragon's Iron Fist, Ice Dragon's Wing Strike, Ice Dragon's Hook Claw, Ice Dragon's Shattering Kiba, Ice Dragon's Grip, Ice Shape Magic. After these 3 days of training in the battle, the energy value can finally be upgraded again. The body of the dragon broke through the 20% mark, and it was officially announced that the second run was 3. However, seeing the big 6% behind dragon power, Loya's mouth twitched. God give me a Jeff, at least I can still think about it. However, when the power of the dragon reaches 6%, Loya can test his previous guesses. Putting down the clean bones in his hands, Loya stood with his eyes closed, his hands slowly moved closer, and the strong cold radiated out uncontrollably, causing a layer of ice crystals to hang on the objects in the room. Suddenly, he suddenly opened his eyes and shouted in a low voice, "Coffin of frozen ice." Accompanied by his movements, a large amount of magic power quickly spewed out of his palm, and when the cold current came into contact with the moisture in the air, it immediately turned into tiny ice chips, making the invisible flow of magic power clearly visible. Click. The sound of freezing sounded, and a piece of ice appeared in front of him in an instant. Loya stared closely at the ice cube in front of him and tapped it with his fingers. Ding ding. The sound is crisp and a sprinkling of cumin must taste good. Loya let go of his hand helplessly. The 6% dragon power did not make any qualitative changes to the ice cubes made by modeling magic. The strength did increase, but it still belonged to the general category. Although the essence of magic power is the same, the power of modeling magic and dragon-slaying magic is completely different from the same level. Equivalent to the ancient old hydraulic press compared to the modern 10,000-ton hydraulic press, the same water flow force can only be used to squeeze oil, while the latter is enough to manufacture high-strength alloy forgings. This is inherently limited, and unless Roha can develop stronger modeling magic on his own, its final strength can now be seen. So Loya is so concerned about whether the power of the dragon can increase the strength of modeling magic. After completing the experiment, Loya looked at the upward arrow behind the energy value and chose to upgrade. In any case, this system is the capital of his life, and every point of strength is more able to save his life. Without the support of this system, one day I might become the cannon fodder responsible for the narration. The familiar blue formation appeared at his feet, and the upward airflow blew his hair high, looking like the strongest warrior in the universe. Should I cut my hair? Loya thought. The feeling that the roots of the hair wanted to fly away from the scalp made his scalp feel numb. The blue diamond on the wrist began to disintegrate, like a swimming snake, circling and crawling all over the body. Intensive blue energy appeared in the air, and Ryan quickly submerged into Loya's body. He could feel the magic boiling in his body every time he upgraded, and the feeling of growing little by little made him unable to stop. Stepping into the second rank, the movement of the upgrade is far from being comparable to that of the first rank. Just when Loya upgraded, an inexplicable momentum was created out of thin air. Even if it was far apart, it made people feel very depressed. The headquarters of the Navy, the main body of the fortress. In the Marshal's office, Zephyr and Sengoku are still processing the materials left over from the assessment. This assessment is basically enough to decide whether these recruits will stay after graduation, especially the top 100, and the two big heads need to consider it slowly. Then, this Hugh Piedman, let's arrange to stay in the headquarters. Sengoku clicked on the list and said to Zephyr who was beside him. Zephyr dug out the information on the table, looked at it and nodded. Well, it is indeed possible. Although this test result is out of 20, his swordsmanship is still good. Seeing that Zephyr had no problem, Sengoku took out his Yuhi pen and ticked the name. Start as a second-class soldier first, and then decide to be promoted after seeing the merits of the war. At this moment, the familiar pressure suddenly enveloped, the air seemed to be condensed, and the movements of the two of them stopped at the same time. The feeling is mysterious, indescribable, and gives you the nervousness of the prey facing the predator. At first Sengoku thought who had awakened Conqueror's haki, but after investigation, it was found that no one fainted. Feeling the oppression that felt as if his heart was being held, Sengoku took a deep breath and calmed down the restlessness in his heart, then said to Zephyr with a wry smile, "I heard that this kid Loya carried the only silver on the island on his back. The ape was killed." Zephyr didn't look up and continued to read the information in his hand. "That's right. First, he used a large-scale attack to inflict heavy damage on the opponent, but you also know the vitality of the silverback great ape. Even if his heart is shattered, he can still go berserk for 5 minutes. Facing the rampant silverback great ape, Loya used the move he had been developing to kill the opponent on the spot with one punch and one kick." Quote. "Oh," Sengoku murmured lightly, "didn't you say he is weak in melee combat? He was able to kill the silverback great ape." Hearing this, Zephyr raised his head, as if he saw the figure from a few days ago, shook his head. He took out a stack of photos from Kabuto and handed it to Sengoku. "The people who were present at the time were given a gag order by me. These materials were originally planned to be sorted out in detail and then given to you tomorrow, but since you mentioned it, you can take a look now." Seeing Zephyr's serious look, Sengoku was a little confused. He muttered while taking the photo from Zephyr's hand, "What force makes you so nervous, no matter how he is still?" "This yes." Sengoku's pupils shrank, patted the table and stood up, staring at the photo in his hand. "That could be dragon power." Zephyr supported his chin with his hand and said with a sigh, "Fortunately, there is no such terrifying thing in reality. I sometimes really doubt whether Loya is a devil fruit person. This kind of power, it's terrible." Sengoku didn't answer, and looked carefully one by one. In the photo, it is the appearance of Loya fighting with the silver ape after the dragon's scales are exposed. The fierce claws and bone spurs all reveal a strong killing intent. There was not a trace of emotion revealed during the strike, as if an aloof spirit was quietly watching the mortal world. But none of this shocked Sengoku, but something else. On the edge of the photo, a floating stone was outlined by Yuhi's pen. Looking at the handwriting, many things were marked on the edge of the battlefield of one person and one beast. After comparing the next photo, Sengoku found that these things did not move at all. You must know that in the last one, Loya was knocked into the air, just beside the stone. In that kind of intense battle, although it was not a direct impact, the wind pressure alone could blow up a large living person, let alone a small pebble. The situation after that is even more shocking. No matter how fierce the battle between the two, these marked things seem to take root in the photo, and there is no change until the end of the battle. Sengoku slapped the photo heavily on the table, his expression more serious than ever. "Zephyr, what's your guess?" "Ah, maybe it's time-related or space-related abilities." Zephyr's eyes looked through the window to the recruits' dormitory in the distance, where Roha was unscrupulously exuding coercion. "Kuzan told me that Roha's freezing ability is different from his. Pay more attention to the feature of freezing. This it is also the reason why he is restrained by the Loya attribute. So I guess, maybe, the highest point of the ice dragon fruit can freeze time and space." Chapter 33 Awakening Pseudo-Dragon. "Freeze, space-time." Sengoku murmured and repeated Zephyr's words, and then fell into deep thought. Indeed, apart from the explanation of freezing time and space, he couldn't think of any other abilities. Animal-type phantom beasts, which are rarer than natural-type fruits, each with strange special abilities. Phoenix, Marco's regeneration characteristics are the same as the shock characteristics of his own Buddha form. If this is the case, then Loya's ice dragon fruit has the ability to freeze time and space, so it doesn't seem strange. A ghost. This is frozen time and space. What a terrifying ability once developed. Without further ado, as long as Loya can freeze the powerhouse of the 4th Emperor level for 1 second, Sengoku will now dare to go to the new century to regain lost ground. What kings go down to the Chiwahai, the worst revolutionary army, all go to the side. If you don't agree, I'll bring Loya and Kizaru here. For a second without any defense, I can beat you half to death if you don't kill you. Sengoku excitedly shared his thoughts with his old friends, and then suddenly sighed. But, it seems that Loya doesn't say that he can do that. I'm afraid, he doesn't even know he has this ability. Of course, Zephyr picked up the photos on the table, otherwise, we wouldn't be able to take these photos. With that kid's slick temper, this kind of trump card at the bottom of the box will definitely be hidden deeply and deeply. Besides, even if he is not afraid of being exposed and can use it at will, then he should directly freeze the time of Silver's back to the Great Ape, and kill it with one fist. Speaking of this, Zephyr reminded Sengoku, however, from the situation in the photo, the object whose time was frozen by the ice dragon is not affected by external influences. I don't think your idea can be realized. Hey, that's right, Sengoku sighed, stroking the head of the goat beside his feet. Anyway, it's too early to say this, whether Loya can develop to that level is still unknown. Until Loya takes that step, the devil knows how much trouble he will cause me. Do you know how many anonymous letters I received last month complaining about Loya? There are even those instructors. Hee. In the face of the old friend's complaint, Zephyr remembered what Loya had done last month, and the corner of his mouth fell into contemplation with a smile. At this moment, Loya doesn't know how many legends he has left on the island, and he really didn't notice the freezing of time and space. In that fierce battle, without observation hockey, he was distracted by a stone at his feet that could not pose any threat to him. How stupid would he have been? Silver's fist on the back of the Great Ape was no joke. The problem he is worried about now is, what should I do if the military uniform is torn and can't be sewn? It's very urgent to wait online. Hey, I forgot again, this is Lao Su's last outfit. Just now, after the blue energy submerged in Roha's body, the dragon pattern on his body immediately began to beat uncontrollably, and the light blue dragon scales loomed on the skin along with the rhythm. Loya was stunned for a moment, then reacted immediately. When he was about to take off his clothes, the dragon scales had already broken out of his body. After all, it was a step too late. His pants and t-shirt had been cut by sharp dragon scales, there was a big hole in the back of his shirt, and a pair of bat wings were stubbornly breathing in the air. Because he felt distressed about Bailey and his cultivation problems, Loya, who was in a trance, started the upgrade without taking off his clothes. When the power of the dragon in the body boiled and the dragon scales grew, the first reaction of Luoya, who was caught off guard, was, hold the grass. Don't blame Loya for not having enough vocabulary, because when happiness, sadness, excitement, and sadness can all be described with a grass grip, why say so much? The problem arose. You must know that the uniform belongs to the image project of an army, which reflects the military and political nature of this army, and is the most serious army configuration. The Navy has always had extremely strict requirements on the dress of soldiers. No matter how individual the suits of the three generals are, in formal occasions, the cloak of justice is also indispensable. It is enough to prove the strictness of the Navy on uniforms. For ordinary soldiers, the Navy stipulates that when the uniform is damaged due to non-combat, when going to pick up the new uniform, the soldier needs to run around the fortress shirtless with the newly received uniform, and shout, "I'm wrong," while running. As an example, because of being stunned for a second, Loya's movements were a little slower, so you can imagine Loya's schedule tomorrow. Hey, why are you so unlucky? Loya sighed, picking up the torn cloth strips on the ground and putting them away. Reopening the panel, Loya checked the upgraded attributes. Name, Christopher Loya. Energy stage, second order 6 layer. Energy value, 0.001. Mana, 9,000 9,000. Mana recovery speed, 850 per minute. The magic value still increases at a rate of 1,000 points per layer, which is basically fixed. Loya guessed that unless it is the second order and the third order, his magic value will not increase explosively. After reading the attribute panel, on the skill panel, the body of the dragon and the power of the dragon have not changed. However, next to the ice modeling magic, another icon extended from the power of the dragon, and it was slightly exuding a golden fluorescent light that represented the use. This is a new skill. Loya looked at the icon in surprise. He was sure that there was no icon there before that. It was not that the gray state indicated that it could not be used, but that there was no icon at all. This is a real new skill. He quickly clicked the icon to view the properties. Awakening pseudo-dragonization. After using the power of the dragon enters a low concentration awakening state, temporarily increasing the fit of the dragon's body in a stage, and stops before the second critical point. Increases the recovery speed of mana, increases the strength of dragon-slaying magic, consumes 30 mana per second, and increases the awakening degree of dragon power according to the duration after the state ends. From this passage, Loya keenly grasped two key points. First of all, he has always thought that the body of the dragon is improved from scratch with his exercise, so it can withstand more and more dragon power and increase the percentage. But now the interpretation of the skill proves him wrong. It is not because his physical fitness has become stronger that he has endured more dragon power. On the contrary, it was because his body became stronger after he was able to adapt to more dragon power. Because the dragon's body pays attention to the degree of fit, since it is a fit, then there is always a master and a deputy to be a fit. So it is Loya who is in line with the existing dragon power, not to cultivate and improve, to make it stronger. Thinking about it, the system clearly stated that the dragon's body is the degree to which the dragon-killing magician adapts to the power of the dragon. Since it is adaptation rather than endurance, it is obvious that he got the wrong direction from the beginning. The power of the dragon and the body of the dragon, one is the power of the dragon, and the other is the body of the dragon. The power of the dragon and the body of the dragon are naturally a perfect fit, but because Roha is a human being, even if the body is transformed by the dragon-slaying magic, he cannot inherit that power perfectly, so he needs to slowly adapt to the power of the dragon. He's not building a house from scratch, he's climbing stairs. This discovery pointed out the direction for Loya's future cultivation, which was enough to save him a lot of time. The second point, Loya discovered that the moves he developed could actually affect the system in reverse. Awakening pseudo-dragonization was never included before, and the system has not included it. But now it has appeared, and it has become a usable state. Loya thought about his behavior during this period of time, and there is only one answer, that is, he developed a big move Shikai. Shikai's transformation is self-evident. Although it can't keep up with the real awakening mode of Natsu in the later stage of the original work, it is also much stronger than the state of dragon scales on his body when he was in the Tower of Paradise. It was because Loya completed and used this move, and then as he leveled up, the move was included in the system. Every upgrade he makes will not only affect himself, but also the system. Just like a software update, new functions will be added after the upgrade. Chapter 34 Eating is a big problem. Recommendation. Collection. Thinking of this, Loya closed his eyes and chose to use the skill. Hum. A slight buzzing sounded, the magic power began to vibrate, the magic lines began to swim, and pieces of scale armor began to emerge, and the transparent scales were quickly dyed with a touch of light blue, and then turned to dark blue. Swish. Two bat wings suddenly unfolded in the room, and the gusting wind blew the things in the room upside down. The icy cold air rolled over, and everything in the room froze quickly. The icy cold wind suddenly blew open the window, freezing the water vapor blown from the direction of the sea, forming a strip of ice crystals. Loya looked at his hands, the tile-shaped nails turned into his familiar claws, the white sharp claws exuded a warm luster, and the sharp arc made people shudder. Feeling the situation in the body, Loya nodded with satisfaction. Without high-intensity battles, the mana consumption can barely keep up with the recovery rate. Other aspects are similar to when I use it independently, but the control of mana can be more delicate, and it will not become chaotic due to rough operations. Overall so much better than just messing around with myself. Quote. Shikai is Roha who uses modeling magic in his body to let his body devour the magic power of the ice attribute, and forcibly, wake up, the power of the dragon. The power of the dragon, which was very angry when he woke up, ran rampant in his body uncontrollably, which caused the modeling magic to be unusable. Now this form is classified as a system skill, and naturally it will not be so simple and rude. It reaches the level of awakening by directly activating the power of the dragon in the body, and the dragon scales emerge. In this way, not only will the modeling magic not be restricted, but even the strength of ordinary ice cubes will not be weaker than the ice cubes made by Dragon Slayer magic because of the increase in the power of the dragon. So now Loya can face the mole and say, "Give me 5 minutes, and you will be cool." Just as Loya was indulging in the joy of the increase in strength, a loud shout resounded through the dormitory building. "Loya, twice in one night, you've stopped people from sleeping." "Oh yes. This form will exude dragon might." A few days later, Malin Fodor. Loya has slept well these past few days. After the actual combat assessment was over, the recruits got a 1-week vacation, which was a rare thing. Escape from tiring training and choose to sleep in the vast majority. It was not until the 3rd watch of the day that he reluctantly chose to get up. Because after waiting for another hour, the cafeteria will stop serving food. This is a terrible thing for a foodie like Loya. Food. Eat and eat. Oh who. After simply washing and cleaning, Loya opened the door and rushed out. It is worth mentioning that the dormitory building is centered on the room where Loya lives, and now there are no people up and down. Living next door to a guy who likes to experiment with his ability to develop his moves in his room, with only a wall between them, really tempers his temperament. Because you don't know when you will be woken up by the cold, why the floor starts to leak again, and you get up to find that the clothes you washed last night were frozen hard and hung on the rope like dried salted fish. They couldn't fight, so they chose to retreat strategically. Anyway, the dormitory was not full. Tell the uncle downstairs, and you can change the room after registering. There were very few pedestrians on the way to the cafeteria, and there were usually people coming and going. At mealtime, the scene of the recruits rushing into the cafeteria like huskies broke loose. Instead, it was a sparse, yawning guy who walked forward like a zombie in a horror movie. Loya greeted them and walked all the way to the cafeteria. S was not here today. I heard that she went back to her hometown in Beihai for a vacation. She followed the supply ship and left the headquarters on the day the recruits set off. So now in the cafeteria is the second in command, a man who is very clean but still looks like a bandit. Seeing Loya walking into the cafeteria talking and laughing, his expression changed, and he dropped the spoon and ran to the kitchen. With a click, he locked the door from the inside. A group of people watched this scene in a daze, and the hands holding the dinner plates were stiff in the air. "This is... What's the matter?" "I don't know, it looks like you're scared." "Afraid." Loya pondered for a moment, propped herself up on the table, and looked inside. "I saw 2 large buckets of curry bubbling hot, a large pot of rice placed in the front, and then... it was gone." Loya looked at this scene in shock, and suddenly became angry. "Bastard! Are you trying to starve me to death?" 2 large buckets of curry and rice are enough to feed the hundreds of recruits. Today, the recruit camp is still on holiday, and there are not many people left in the base, so maybe there is enough to eat. But this definitely didn't count Loya's share. Due to the increase in strength, now he can eat 100 people's food by himself. If he was a bully who ran rampant in the recruit camp, he would be better off. Grab it directly, and feed himself first, and the others should be hungry. But alas, not. Loya is quite popular in the recruit camp, and he can't do anything he can't do, and he can't be ashamed to do things that run rampant in the village. Feeling the air conditioning overflowing from Loya's body, the recruits wisely chose to avoid it, and took away the rice and curry in the cauldron next to them. It was really hard to eat when it was frozen. "Come out. I promise not to kill you." Loya's mouth was sprayed with ice crystals, and the blue energy in his hand disappeared. The onlookers who watched shook their heads. Who would believe it if you say no? When you hit it with a fist, everyone turns into a popsicle, and you can send a death notice when you clean up. Just then, a deep voice sounded. Well, it's okay, Loya, and Uncle Art didn't do it on purpose. Speaking of which, it was because of you that you were fiddling with your move again last night. At that time, Uncle Art was preparing for today. The ingredients to be used. As a result, the aura of your body radiated, and he shook his hands in fright, causing a fire to burn the stock clean, and he had to go to collect the punishment in the afternoon. Quote. The voice was very familiar. Loya turned around, and helplessly spread her hands to the visitor. Even so, we have to figure out what to eat for lunch today. Don't tell me you're full, Aludo. The person who came was Arudo, a member of the elite camp. He was wearing a casual shirt, floral shorts, and clogs under his feet, looking very relaxed. In his left hand, he held a dinner plate not much bigger than his palm. Not a single grain of rice was left on it, only curry juice remained on the edge of the plate. Putting the dinner plate in the recycling area, Aludo sighed, how can I be full? Today the chef of our elite camp is ill, so I can only come out to find something to eat. Although my appetite is not as good as yours, it is better than yours. The average person is much bigger. I was going to take a break, but I didn't expect to encounter such a thing, really. Aludo is 4 meters tall, standing there like a brown bear, eating an amazing meal every meal. Before Loya joined the Navy, he has been holding the title of the King of Big Stomachs. But compared with Loya, Aludo was ashamed and gave up the title of King of Big Stomach. It's just that Loya is not very happy. The two faced each other, sighing neatly and drooping their heads. At this time, the fellow recruits who were sharing the curry rice suggested, have you forgotten? Members of the elite camp can go to the barracks canteen to eat. You should try it there. It should be too late now. Loya raised his head in shock and looked at Aldo. There's still this kind of fuck. No, there's such a thing. Aludo also raised his head in shock. I don't know. The corner of the mouth of the talking recruit twitched. Well, what other elite battalion members don't know, I know so clearly as a little dragon. You guys are so offensive. Don't talk, I want to be quiet. However, under the threat of two well-known violent men, he chose to compromise, otherwise it would not be worth it to be beaten for a meal. Everyone knows how terrifying Loya, who can't get enough to eat, was robbed on the day of the actual combat test. The dry food is the proof. Yes, this is a regulation that has been implemented since the previous year. On the one hand, because the canteen of the recruit camp is too overloaded, sometimes it is too busy, so the approval system has been approved. Keep the team cohesive, that's all I know. Release the collar in his hand. Loya looked at Aludo. Go to dinner. Let's go together. After reading the book review, I found that book friends are more or less urging more. Not this sentence, but to discuss the future development direction of Loya. After reading it, I remembered a comment from many days ago, and ran go and open it again. Sure enough, my book is so lacking in depth, what will happen in the future is almost completely guessed. Oh, this is really. Chapter 35 Carp is here. Leaving the cafeteria, Loya did not rush to run. If he really wants to hurry, his speed can be very fast, that is not the big stupid bear that Aludo is chasing. But here comes the problem. Although he has basically been designated as a member of the elite battalion by default, and he is confident enough to pass the entire battalion a few days later. But he is not yet a member of the elite camp. What if the canteen does not recognize the person? So, he stared at Aludo, looking straight at the latter. What asked wrong? I'm thinking, I'd better take insurance with you. If I don't get meals there, I can still pull you out to guarantee me. After all, regardless of Aldo's stunned appearance, Loya hammered with both hands, condensing the magic power. Ice make ice wolf. Ow! Two canis creatures composed of ice cubes appeared in front of them, and their 2-meter-long bodies shone brightly in the sun, as charming as diamonds. Aludo looked at the lifelike ice wolves in surprise, and saw one of them crouched down and buckled his neck with his hindpaws. After a while, he asked, "Your ice cubes can still move freely. This is unscientific. You must know that although those with natural fruit ability can also make elements change into various appearances, they absolutely cannot be so flexible. Where is this simple ice cube? This is a new species that does not grow meat and grow ice. On the premise of knowing the devil fruit, you actually talk to me about science." Loya looked at him with contempt, then turned over and mounted an ice wolf. "Come up, hurry up. It's definitely faster than you run." Of course, ice wolves are inanimate, but as Arudo said, ice cubes can move freely, which is simply unscientific. This is also a limitation of the One Piece world. The OP world does not have a complete training system. The combat power is indeed strong, but the use of energy is rough and simple, just like the Saiyan tribe destroyed by Frieza. Even with the aura of the protagonist, Mr. Kakarot, a child of low-level warriors, learned how to use chi, and it didn't take long for his strength to slaughter the group of high-level warriors. In addition, the OP world's division of strength is not clear. Take the swordsman as an example, the one who understands the profound meaning of slashing iron as the swordsman. The swordsman here is not a level of strength, but a title. Before and after this, there is no term to replace the strength of the corresponding stage. And the swordsman who is stronger than the average swordsman, the fame is big enough, the title has more words, called the big swordsman. Loya, who was used to reading upgrade-style novels, was speechless for a while. This limitation made the Aborigines in the pirate world unable to understand the concept of magic, and Loya was too lazy to explain it, and it was directly attributed to the special nature of the fruit that sent Arudo. The movement and stillness in modeling magic, Loya will ponder when he is idle and bored. But after repeated tests, he discovered that at this stage, creating a static magic like an ice bomb to paste your bear's face is more efficient than letting an ice wolf go out and bite. One of the main problems that has not been solved is the strength of modeling magic. His magic power is indeed the magic power of ice attribute Dragon Slayer, but it only makes the ice cubes he creates harder than ordinary ice cubes, not as hard as steel-like Dragon Slayer magic. To the point of smashing through the deck. So Loa won't waste mana doing useless work when fighting. The only time he was satisfied with the dynamic magic was when he just developed Icefall Funeral, Yinkuzan. He then took control of the seemingly discarded ice on the floor around him and grabbed Kuzan while he was stunned. But the result is as said before, because of insufficient strength, Kuzan resisted directly with his strong physical fitness, not to mention elementalization. Apart from being a little embarrassed, there is no shit. Under Loya's urging, Aldo rode on the ice wolf in amazement. But the next second, Loya laughed and rolled off his mount. Not counting the tail, there is no small ice wolf with a length of 2 meters. Loya can ride on it and spin on it. But he forgot one thing, that idiot Aldo didn't pay attention at all, that is, Aldo is 4 meters tall. What is the concept of 4 meters? Guys with severe fear of heights look down enough to pass out. The wolf is not a horse or a cow. Its evolutionary structure is not used as a mount, so the legs appear very short when lying on the ground. Aludo sat up, and the ice wolf got up and stood up, but Aludo's feet were still stepping on the ground. What kind of mount is this? Looking at Loya who was laughing and rolling on the ground, Aldo's face turned black, and the clogs touched the ground crisply, making a bang-dong-dong sound. After enduring for a while, seeing that Loya couldn't stop at all, Aludo roared, "Enough. What's so funny? Is it my fault for being tall? No, the big advantage is the big one. What do you know?" Seeing this, Loya knew that he had better stop laughing, otherwise Arudo, who would be so embarrassed and angry, would have to find him a real PK. Don't look at this man's rough and tight skin, in fact, his face is very thin. Bulging his cheeks and holding back a smile, Loya motioned for Aldo to stand up, then put his hand on the ice wolf and activated the magic. I saw that the ice wolf quickly began to expand, and in the process of getting bigger, the limbs and head also changed. Soon, Loya withdrew his hand, and what reappeared in front of Arudo was an ice horse more than 3 meters high. Only now did Arudo feel relieved, turned over and mounted the ice horse, pulled up the ice-made reins, and gave a whistle. Let's go. Kick, kick, kick. The ice horse stepped on the frost and ran away, leaving an ice road behind its buttocks. Loya hurriedly mounted the ice wolf and followed. Wait for me. I don't know the way. The canteen of the barracks is much larger than that of the new barracks, with a total of 3 floors up and down. Still far away, Loya smelled the aroma of the food. The Welfed and Welfed Navy officers came out of the gate one after another, briefly chatting with their friends and then going their separate ways. Correct. An ice wolf and an ice horse ran side by side on the avenue, which really attracted the attention of many people. Arudan's iconic physique is very conspicuous, and he knows a lot of people, but who is the dwarf next to him? Under the disclosure of people familiar with the matter, everyone knew who the little man was. Hemp egg. This guy is the guy who disturbs people's dreams every night from time to time this month. Come on, beat him. The guy who said this was despised by his companions. Yuhi withdrew his ears from the crowd. No way, this kid was trained by General Kuzan, and I heard that he killed a silverback great ape during the assessment. Not to mention their lieutenants and school officials, I am afraid that the generals who are less powerful will not be able to win Loya. As a result, a group of people stared at the same place, and they had to watch Loya stop at the entrance of the cafeteria and enter the cafeteria chatting and laughing with Aludo. Quickly rushing to the window of the meal, Loya glanced around and immediately decided on the menu. This and that, bring the pot to me. And the rice, also bring the pot. The other side of the fruit hasn't been cut, right? Bring the basket. The uncle who was playing the rice stared blankly at Loya, suddenly remembered something, and shouted, You are Loya. I know you, the best rice bucket in the boot camp. Full of anticipation, Loya's face turned black, and a cross appeared on his forehead. He grabbed the uncle's collar and roared viciously, Who says I'm a rice bucket? Believe it or not, I'll beat you up. I'm a foodie, and eating is a blessing, do you understand? Aludo hurried forward to pull the frame. A big hand separated the two. He nodded embarrassedly to the veterans who came over. I'm sorry, he's in a bad mood for not eating for a day. Under Arudo's persuasion, Loya finally let go of the uncle, and happily went to find a seat with the food. Although Aludo was embarrassed, he left the window with no less food than Loya unceremoniously. Leaving the stunned uncle who beat the rice in place, and the neat and tidy counter. The two sat facing each other, and there was only the two of them on a large table, serving food to their mouths one by one. Eating and eating, Loya opened Aludo's big hand with a snap, pointed at the cauldron next to him and said, That's yours. The veterans in the cafeteria wiped the cold sweat from their foreheads and watched the two gobble their food. At this time, the noise in the cafeteria suddenly stopped neatly, and several voices were full of excitement, converging into one sentence, Lieutenant General Karp. A solemn statement, excluding the number of words of thanks. This chapter is actually 2,500 words. I didn't make up the word count. Chapter 36 Karp wants to take apprentices. Ha ha ha, don't be so serious, let's all go to dinner. The coming person is a strong old man, even though he has white hair, but his chest is broad and his body is muscular. He is not weak and middle-aged. Dark skin exudes healthy color. It is the famous, Navy hero, Tekken Karp. Loya raised her head when she heard this voice, which was almost indistinguishable from the dubbing. Monkey D. Karp. In the entire op world, there are 3 things that make Loya most curious. First, what cards do Tianlong people have to maintain their dominance? Second, how is the geography of this world formed? Third, how strong is Tekken Karp? It can be seen from the words he said after Akainu killed Ace during the war on the top, that Karp at that time had the ability to kill Akainu Sakazuki. He also asked Sengoku to stop himself, otherwise he was afraid he couldn't help it. With this level of strength, who would dare to take Karp's words as a negative dog barking far away? Akainu is a dignified general and is known as the strongest combat power in the Navy. I am afraid that he can't help but kill him. How strong is Garp? So Loya is really curious about Garp, even more than his exploration of the secrets of the D family. Master Garp. When Loya was in a daze, Aldo stood up straight and saluted. In addition to the three generals who went out to the recruit camp, Baruto admired the Iron Fist Garp the most. This is the great hero who arrested Heiza King Goer D. Roger with his own hands. Aldo grew up listening to his legend since he was a child. For the three generals, Aludo is a yearning for the reverence, and for Garp, it is a real worship. Seeing Aldo's excited expression, Loya still didn't know what he was thinking. But he was also certain that Arudo did not know that Dorag, who was identified by the government as the most vicious criminal in the world, was the son of the object of his adoration. A strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and Roja considered whether it would be a little spoiler. At this time, Garp waved the crowd to disperse, and walked to the window where the meal was made. "Ah, it's your chef today, Marcus, that old rule, give me one." Marcus is the uncle who provided food for Loya and Aldo. Hearing Garp's words, Marcus burst into tears. Sir Garp, maybe you need to wait. Garp has his own residence in Marineford, but he can't cook as he lives alone. He usually eats 3 meals a day in the barracks cafeteria. Huh, why? Garp asked strangely. Suddenly, he found that the counter was cleaned up inside and out. Immediately stunned. Hey, Marcus, when did you stop working? There's still a bunch of bastards in the back who haven't eaten enough. How is it possible to stop work? Marcus defended weakly, pointing to Loya and Aldo. The two little guys over there took away all the prepared food. You know, the food is not allowed to be left to cool. It has always been cooked according to the flow of people in the cafeteria, and they all took away the food that was just made. Quote. Oh, there's such a thing. Garp turned his head and looked at Aludo, who was staring at himself from the corner of the eye, his hands shaking with excitement, and the little man opposite Aludo who was eating and drinking with his belly open. There were only 2 people, but they occupied an entire table, and the mountains of food on the table belonged to both of them. That kid is the guy Kuzan has been teaching all this time. Garp thought. Kuzan personally taught a recruit, and when the news broke, everyone thought it was a joke. Admiral, teaching recruits. What an international joke. What can recruits learn? Still running and exercising. However, with the news that gradually spread in the elite camp, as well as the sound of explosions and ice splashing in the small square every day at dusk, everyone slowly accepted this incredible information. Garp only learned of him when he was upgraded for the first time after Loya came to the headquarters. After all, the inexplicable momentum was so shocking that even he was affected a lot. By the way, Sengoku didn't say yesterday that the only silverback great ape on the trial island was killed, and he asked Huo Shaoshan and Ghost Spider to catch one back. Garp remembered what happened at the meeting yesterday. At that time, he happened to be thirsty after eating too much, so he casually listened to a few words while looking for water. Thinking of this, Garp is very curious, what kind of ability is this Christopher Loya, who makes Zepha and Kuzan look down on him differently? Marcus, bring it to me later. Garp greeted Marcus and walked slowly to Loya's table. Aludo has been watching Garp, and when he saw him coming, he suddenly stood up with a flick of his chopsticks, splashing Roa with fried rice. Ka, Lord Garp. Loya ripped off the rice grains speechlessly, then stood up lazily and saluted. Lieutenant General Garp, hello. No matter how curious you are, it's not as important to eat. Aludo is obviously not a qualified foodie. Facing idols, he gave up food directly. In addition to contempt, Loya can only do as the locals do. Although this is the cafeteria, there is no need to salute when facing the officer, but the other party is the naval hero Monkey D. Garp. If you really want to treat it casually, Loya bet on tomorrow's dinner and promises that someone will teach him a lesson within 24 hours. Including but not limited to those lieutenant generals of the mole. Seeing Loya's languid look, Garp's eyes were deep. It's really Kuzan's disciple, I learned 10% of this temperament. Thinking like this, Carp said different sentences. Ha 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 ha, what a spirited guy. Not bad. It's a good thing to be able to eat. Then he patted Aludo's stomach, coughed awkwardly, and changed the subject. You are Aludo, right? Zephyr values you very much. Last time. Hulu. Aludo and Roja, who were being taught, remained still with a stunned expression. Looking at Carp, who fell asleep and started snoring in an instant, Roja's heart was as noisy as a galloping horse. Hold the grass. You really fell asleep. How did you learn such an unscientific skill? Pat. The snot bubbles exploded, and Carp continued to speak like nothing else. Even the tone remained unchanged. Last time Zephyr was still saying that as long as you keep up with the speed, you can graduate. Well, anyway, that is to say, in so many elite camps, there are only a few who can use armament hockey without graduating. You are a genius. Now applying for graduation, he can't take you. Ha 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 ha. Quote. Although Carp made a big joke at the end, Arudo still didn't feel any sense of relaxation. He stomped hard, and the clogs on his feet smashed. Loya saw that the bones in the bowl shook twice. Aludo, who saluted again, said excitedly, Yes, I got it. So, what do you know? I don't understand why. Loya complained wildly in his heart, and suddenly looked at Carp, and the two found that each other's eyes were full of helplessness. This kid, it's interesting. Garp thought quietly, waving Aldo to sit down. Then he looked at Loya, his straight eyes as if he wanted to see through Loya. Hey, are you Loya? After asking, without waiting for Loya to reply, Garp continued, in Zephyr's words, your kid is the most talented guy among the recruits, but it doesn't look like much. So. After he finished speaking, he used his little finger to clasp the booger and popped it out. Loya Gujing looked at Carp as a demon without any waves. Although he didn't know why Carp wanted to belittle himself, but thinking about this person's unassuming personality, Loya said that he was very calm. D family, the Carp line is definitely an alternative. You don't need to be surprised to do anything weird. But it would be rude not to reply. Loya thought for a moment and replied, because I'm still a recruit, oh bracket smile. What do you mean by smiling in brackets? Carp choked, his hands shook, his fingernails hurt his nostrils, and tears were about to flow out. After a pause, he decided not to bother about Loya's words, and directly and decisively explained his purpose. Well, it doesn't matter. I ask you, boy, do you want to be this old man's disciple? Chapter 37 People Who Have Been Fooled. Huh, Aludo raised his head blankly. Just now, what did I hear? Ah, Loya was completely stunned by Carp's sudden question. Just now, what did I hear? What? The crowd with pricked ears screamed neatly. Just now, what did we hear? Carp picked out his ears impatiently. I'm making you so noisy, why don't you just accept a disciple? What's the fuss? These words are so righteous, almost made Loya feel that his ability to accept is too poor. But the crowd said that it is not surprising to accept disciples, but Lieutenant General Carp, it's strange that you want to accept disciples, okay. I think when Kuzan was still your officer, you never said that you wanted to put him away as a disciple, so what's going on now? Loya really didn't come back to his senses. Why did Garp suddenly accept himself as a disciple? Why does this kind of unfolding have a strange sense of sight? My name is not Zhao Rishan. Op world, the relationship between the disciple and the master is mostly preserved in the gym. On the sea, what people yearn for is freedom, whether they are good or bad, good or evil, they are all in pursuit of freedom. Therefore, people in this world, especially the men in the sea, generally acquiesce to accepting apprentices as troublesome and refuse to accept apprentices. Hawkeye taught Zoro for 2 years, and Rayleigh taught Luffy for 2 years, so are they master and apprentice? Of course not. According to the point of view of the sea, that is, I can teach you, but you are not my disciple. Kuzan was, become, Loya's teacher, or he acquiesced to this title because Loya was annoying him. He himself never declared that Loya was his disciple in public. Zephyr accepts apprentices, it is habit. In the past, he was known as the general who did not kill, but one could imagine his personality, which was much better than Garp's evil ghost name. This kind of character was magnified when he lost his family and became the chief instructor of the recruit battalion, which made him love all recruits, and only then regarded the recruits of the elite battalion as his disciples. And Carp. Are you loving or being entangled? Besides, Loya can't compliment Carp's educational effectiveness. He taught a son and became the leader of the Silencer army. He taught 2 grandsons and became pirates. One is the captain of the 2nd Division of Whitebeard, although he farts after a few years. One unsurprisingly is the future One Piece. Are you accepting me as your apprentice now? Are you going to send talents to the pirates or are you going to be a rebel against the world government? To sum up, Loya decisively chose to refuse. I'm sorry Lieutenant General Carp, I can't be your disciple. Aludo lifted Loya excitedly, who was about to give him a fist, but found that Aludo had burst into tears at some point. I am so envious. No, damn it. You actually rejected Lord Carp. Do you know who he is? Loya reluctantly broke free and stood on the stool to straighten his collar. Before he could speak, he heard Kapuna's unbelievable voice. You refused. Boy, tell me why, or you'll be screwed today. Carp's original purpose was to disgust Zephyr. Think about it, everyone knows that Zephyr has acquiesced to this disciple. Now that he has stepped in, will Zephyr get a brain hemorrhage after knowing Akatsuki? The two have been comrades in arms for decades, so they never let go when they can disgust each other. He even thought of several sets of ways to deal with people, but what he never expected was that Loya rejected him. This made Carp's old face unable to hang himself. It was himself who was out of tune on weekdays, and Sengoku who was angry and panicked. When was it his turn to panic? Fuck. Carp suddenly tapped his head and found a reason for himself. Loya, you must not know, right? After all, you used to be an ordinary person. Come and let me tell you, I am Vice Admiral Mancha D. Card of the Navy Headquarters. Pooh. Before Cap could finish his words, Loya interrupted his boasting with a look of contempt. The naval hero who personally captured Gul D. Roger, the famous Iron Fist Lieutenant General, and the famous Navy's evil ghost. The name of Mancha D. Carp, even if I used to be a humble handyman, I often hear it. Then, in the stunned expression of Carp, Loya shook his head and sighed. The teacher chooses the disciple chooses the teacher. Lieutenant General Carp, please allow me to ask a disrespectful question. What do you know? What do I know? Kaplum thought in a daze, and suddenly laughed. Ha ha ha, are you worried that I can't teach you Loya? Ha 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 ha, how is it possible? I know a lot, Navy 6 styles of Grandmaster, armament hockey I haven't been afraid of anyone. Carp smiled proudly, but he didn't know that Loya despised him even more, and interrupted him directly. Then I want to ask, what does Teacher Zephyr know? Of course he, Garp was stunned, as if he knew what Zephyr would do. But he is not so easy to give up, and retorted, even if he can, but he is weaker than me. Of course, if you are looking for a master, you must look for a stronger one. Loya continued to shake his head. I will tell you the truth about the remarks that Teacher Zephyr is weaker than you, and I want to correct you a little bit. The purpose of disciple choosing a teacher, or wanting a teacher, is to make himself change. Strong. The strength of a master does not mean the strength of his teaching ability. Quote. As you said, looking for a teacher to find a stronger teacher is because a stronger teacher naturally has a way to become stronger. But, have you ever thought about it? This is the way a teacher becomes stronger. Can it really adapt to the disciples? Not necessarily. After a pause, leaving Carp a short time to think, Loya continued, so the choice of a teacher should not be based solely on the judgment of strength or weakness, but based on his teaching ability. Otherwise, why don't I go to the recognized teacher? The strongest man in the world, Whitebeard. So, the teacher I want doesn't need much strength, it just needs to make me stronger. In my opinion, The best teacher in the world is Zephyr teacher. In terms of strength, he is a former general, not much weaker than you. In terms of teaching, the current 3 major generals and the digital lieutenant generals such as Mole and Huo Shaoshan are all taught by him, and his teaching ability is beyond doubt. As mentioned above, I refuse to take you as my teacher. Karp felt Kuzan's distress a month ago. This kid is too good at talking. Not a rival at all. It seems that the old man has lived in vain all these years. Not even a single disciple who can handle it. Aludo's eyes traveled through time, back to the day he first met Loya. This scene seems familiar. It's all like that. I don't understand. In the end, Loya gave Garp a fatal blow. He leaned close to Garp's ear and whispered with his hand over his hand. Also, Lieutenant General Garp, your only son is actually the Silencer Army. Your teaching ability, please forgive me for being complimented. Quote. Puff. Garp felt that something was broken and could never be recovered. The farce of Garp's apprenticeship ended with Garp suffering the most serious trauma in history. The distraught Garp didn't even bother to ask how Loya knew the secret, and chose to go home desolately. Garp can be heard muttering to himself along the way. Why? Why? In fact, Loya took advantage of Garp's carefree character and used an example that could not bear scrutiny. If you could really worship Whitebeard as your teacher, Loya would have gone there already. That is the strongest in the world. A monster that can knock a Kainu to the ground in a dying state. Who cares about Zephyr with him guiding him? However, fortunately everyone in the Mancha family is like this. As long as it is not related to family members and companions, their IQ will plummet. After sending Garp away, Roha can finally relax and enjoy the food, but the surrounding Navy's eyes have become very unusual. If he was looking at a naughty young junior before, then now he is the kind of deal with the enemy of life. Because what he said made sense, I was speechless. Lieutenant General Garp was fooled and lame, and he could not chat with Loya after being killed. After the meal, Loya didn't take care of Aldo. He was unlucky to choose to give himself a holiday today. Garp was not the only one who was crippled by Loya, but also Aldo. After the separation, he chose to wander around alone and unhappy. Loya lay on the ice wolf's wide back and went straight back to the dormitory to take a nap. Cultivation requires relaxation, and when it is time to relax, relax more. Chapter 38 The battle begins. A week later, Marine Fodder Boot Camp. The golden dawn rippling among the clouds lifts the curtain representing the night. Loya got up early today, and is sitting concentratingly by the artificial lake not far from the dormitory building. Today is the day for him to accept the assessment. Facing hundreds of attacks at one time, he needs to adjust himself and meet the challenge with the best mental outlook. Lest the boat capsize in the gutter. After all, the opponent is the companion of the recruit camp, and Loya dare not use the ice bomb Ice Dragon Roar to clear the field directly. The wisps of cold air entwined around him, falling along with his breathing, and the lake water in front of him had already condensed into a mirror surface. Ice make Chinlintu. Suddenly, a sharp ice cone rose from the lake. At the sharp tip, a carp was pierced through its abdomen. After struggling twice, its eyes lost color. Puff. The next moment, a rain-like sound of breaking through the air sounded, and the ice pick just now was like a switch, causing countless ice picks to rush out of the lake. The dense ice picks rose and fell, and the blood flowers bloomed under the ice surface. The carp living in the lake was considered a disaster. They were pierced by the ice picks countless times until they became muddy. Suddenly, the lake surface calmed down in an instant, and the ice was like spring snow meeting the scorching sun, quickly dissipating, and disappeared in an instant. The dense, tender minced meat floated on the lake, like a bowl of uncooked fish soup. Loya took a deep breath and stood up slowly. Finally, the ice modeling magic has reached the state where it can be freely retracted, but it is still very difficult to completely control the dragon-slaying magic. However, with the modeling magic alone, ordinary lieutenant generals can't stop me now, right? Glancing at the blood-stained surface of Yuhi's lake, Loya nodded with satisfaction. The hit rate is okay, but the strength is reduced just by generating from a long distance. Let's study it when you have time. Chinlintu is a move extended from the funeral of the ice waterfall. It belongs to both dynamic and quiet in modeling magic. In terms of killing range, it is not as good as ice bombs, but in terms of attack power, it is an ice cone with strong armor-piercing ability. Will tell you, what is 1,000 cuts? Loya picked up the coat on the ground and blew a whistle. An ice wolf jumped out of the air, first the front body, then the waist and abdomen, and finally the tail. When it landed, the entire body was clearly visible. Turning over and riding the ice wolf, Loya ran towards the assessment venue. Compared with the recruits of the branch, in addition to the training intensity is heavier than the latter, they also pay more attention to actual combat. In addition to the annual elite assessment, the daily battles are also indispensable. These combat trainings are usually held once a month or a quarter, and Loya joined the Navy just at the end of the last assessment. And a month later is the elite assessment, and the battle training for that month is naturally cancelled. So Loya is here for the first time. The small square where Aldo was fighting was one smaller than this one. Large enough to accommodate 20,000 people, it is one of the most important training grounds for the Navy. Today's assessment venue can be described as very lively. In the past, the battle training was usually 2 people, and the team battle project with the largest number of participants was only 10 people. A precedent for getting up and training. When Loya arrived, a large number of recruits had already gathered in the venue, each of them eagerly looking at Loya with malicious intent. The most active among them were the companions of the 7th team. They helped carry weapons here, and were busy preparing medical supplies there. Then they counted the number of people according to the order of the instructor, and arranged for the recruits to line up to receive weapons. The corners of Loya's eyes twitched, and she really wanted to go up and give them a kick. But he did not dare to do so, because on the high platform directly opposite the entrance of the venue, a group of bigwigs were standing there. Among them are the instructors of the recruit battalion teams, the lieutenant general of the headquarters, and the chief instructor of the recruit battalion, Black Wrist Zephyr. Oh, by the way, there is also a naval hero Garp who is dozing off with snot bubbles, and the supreme commander of the Navy, Sengoku, who has never seen the end of the dragon. Loya buckled his face, grabbed the passing recruits and asked, "Why are Lieutenant General Karp and Marshal Sengoku here?" The recruit was stunned for a moment, then recognized Loya, and said with a hilarious smile, "Oh, it turns out to be the boss of Loya. You said Karp and Marshal Sengoku, they were invited by Zephyr to witness. But do well. Loya. How idle are these 2 people? I won't talk about Garp's temperament. You are a dignified admiral, a big man who shakes the whole sea when you stomp your feet. What are you here to witness? How much can recruits be able to fight?" Luoya didn't know, because of what happened in the previous actual combat assessment. Sengoku paid more attention to him than he imagined. Otherwise, how could he be interested in watching a battle between recruits, even if it is an unprecedented 1 vs hundreds of times? Feeling Roha's gaze, Sengoku locked his gaze on Roha through the crowd and narrowed his eyes slightly. "Zephyr, when did this kid become stronger again?" Although Pirate World does not have a systematic training, it has the bug-level ability of 3-color domineering. Among them, observation hockey is not only used to lock the enemy and predict in the battle, but also can determine the general strength of a person. It is through observation hockey that Sengoku can conclude that Loya is stronger than last week. Hearing Sengoku's words, Zephyr also shrouded observation hockey on Loya, hesitated before saying, "Well, indeed. I feel that the chill on his body is more subtle than before. It seems that today will be a wonderful battle." Loya, who was used as the observation target, didn't know the movements of the 2, but felt cold all over. He glanced around suspiciously, and found a seat against the wall to sit down. The time quickly turned from early morning to morning. Today, Tenten is in a good mood. The clear sky is like a piece of jasper, and the boundless blue color covers everyone's sight. A few seagulls hovered carefreely over the fortress, falling on the Navy flagpole to rest from time to time. The instructors of each team reported the numbers to Zephyr one after another. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Zephyr and Sengoku looked at each other and spoke in a deep voice. Quiet. As soon as Zephyr came out, who was fighting against the front, the recruits who had been talking in a low voice all the time brushed up, and all of them shut up and stood up. Seeing this, Zephyr nodded with satisfaction and continued, "You must all know the battle assessment, and I won't repeat it here. Because today, the assessment we are going to conduct is different from the past. Today, it is no longer up to you to choose the challenge. The goal, but someone, challenge you all. All of you." Loya caused a beast swarm during the actual combat exam, causing countless recruits to suffer. Everyone had been waiting for this day. Now that they heard Zephyr's official announcement, they suddenly screamed with excitement. Looking at the excited recruits who were like the gorillas who had successfully mated, Sengoku smacked his lips. Tisk, this kid, how unpopular in the recruit camp. Zephyr waited for the hustle and bustle to end, and continued to read. The assessment will begin soon. Although this assessment is not mandatory for all members to participate, I also hope that you will show your full strength and present a wonderful battle. After speaking, Zephyr nodded to the Major General next to him, then knocked on the sleeping Garp and dragged him to the specially prepared seat to sit. The Major General instructor saluted and stepped forward. "Christopher Loya, go to the center of the field now." Loya raised his head and walked slowly forward under the eager eyes of the onlookers. On the road, some ruffians wanted to give him a slap in the face, standing motionless on the road he had to pass. Then, they flew straight out of the crowd, slammed into the wall and passed out. The rest of them trembled and made way for Loya. When he came to the center of the field, Luoya did not wait for the instructor to speak, and the ice armor covered his whole body. What was different from the past was that this time the ice armor was even more ferocious. Jinchuriki columns stretched out from above, and Zhang Kiba roared silently at the recruits with his claws. "Sa, have a good fight. I promise I won't kill you." Frost Armor 217 Spider, commonly known as Tentacle Monster. This is a move developed by Loya in order to exercise his control over modeling magic. Offensive and defensive. Even after Loya learns observation hockey in the future, the power will only be stronger. Now, it's enough to deal with this group of chickens. Chapter 39. Does the elite camp count? Do you know why I didn't post a recommendation and thank you yesterday? It's not because Lao Puji is contemptuous, nor because of the opinions of book friends, nor because the mobile assistant is difficult to consult. I got up at 6 o'clock yesterday, and after finishing the list of thanks for the recommendation, I was surprised to find that I held the grass 1,000 words full. The recommendation of book friends is so powerful, it really makes the tree feel ashamed. After a busy week, it's more appropriate to explode. In addition, continue to ask for collections and recommendations. It seems that I am also on the recommendation position this week. On Friday, I remember drinking a little too much at night, but I forgot about it. How dare you believe it? I promise I won't kill you. Loya's murderous aura was AWE inspiring, and he smiled madly and charmingly, no mistake. Facing that blatant threat, many recruits swallowed and retreated subconsciously. Just kidding. Can't you honestly give us a fight? We only slept a few good nights this month, all of which were woken up by you. Wouldn't your conscience hurt? Just when the crowd was turbulent, a tall figure stood up. Ha ha ha, it's kind of interesting. Then come and see if you can kill me, Loya. The voice was so familiar, Loya's eyes widened, staring blankly at the person who came. Arudo, why are you here? That figure was a member of the elite battalion, the Iron Nugget expert Aldo. Today Aludo's dress is different from what Loya has seen in the past. Not only is he dressed neatly, but he also wears 2 solid iron gloves on his hands. Thick iron chains on his 2 arms stick out from behind the gloves, circling around wrapped around him. Aldo, like Loya, is not good at using weapons with his own fists. So he found logistics and built 2 gloves. Loya was aware of this, because the day it was completed was the logistics he and Arudo went with. But, why is Arudo here? Are you from the elite camp? At this time, two figures stepped forward and said neatly. And we owe Loa-kun. *2. Except for the different standing positions, the two people are exactly the same in every aspect of their movements, clothes, demeanor, and tone of voice. Brother Jerome. Loya looked at them in surprise, then turned back suddenly, staring at the instructor on the stage with bad eyes. Why are the members of the elite battalion here? Isn't it the assessment of our recruit battalion? No need to guess, Loya knows. The guys who can mobilize the elite battalion to come here, there is no one but Zephyr. So this sentence seems to be asking about the Major General's instructor, but in fact it is asking about Zephyr behind him. Hearing this, Zephyr raised his eyelids and pretended to be, I don't understand what you're talking about. In the face of Loya's unkind look, the Major General's instructor bit the bullet and explained, this assessment is for the entire recruit battalion, and the elite battalion is also an organization that belongs to the recruit battalion, and naturally has the right to participate. What a shameless statement. Loya looked at Zephyr in shock. Although the elite battalion is indeed a branch under the name of the recruit camp, its funding and facilities were independent of the recruit camp many years ago, and the management rights were directly controlled by Zephyr. Not even Marshal Sengoku could intervene. In addition to the gym that collects tuition fees, even Zephyr is reluctant to spend so much energy on recruiting disciples. The elite teaching mode of the elite camp is more to his taste. But because the Navy has never had a second significant person to take over the recruit battalion, not even a lieutenant general. Therefore, Zephyr has been managing the elite battalion through the identity of the chief instructor of the recruit battalion over the years. In fact, within the Navy, the two have long been tacitly regarded as not the same institution. In recruit training, elite battalion members are considered recruits. Everyone has no rank in the Navy, so why did they never participate? As a result, now Zephyr played a word game with him. Since you are accepting the assessment of the recruit battalion, of course, the elite battalion is also included. But I saved some face for you and didn't ask them to come together. After listening to the explanation of the Major General's instructor, Loya once again had a deeper understanding of the faces of these old fritters. However, he immediately showed an inexplicable smile. Do you think you can threaten me by letting Aldo and Brother Jerome go up together? I was afraid it was fine a week ago, but now. The pattern, Mr. Zephyr. Well, what's the big deal? You are not weak, I hope you will be more merciful later. Aldo, who can't wink, came up and teased Loya. He just hoped to have a good fight with Loya, and he didn't want to and couldn't think clearly about the twists and turns of the incident itself. So the latter rewarded him with an ice spear. Now, all preparations, the actual combat assessment will begin immediately. After the countdown ended, Loya stepped back immediately, dodging the fists thrown by Aldo. His body was still in the air, and he immediately slammed the hammer with both hands, and the endless cold air quickly turned into a substance in the air. Ice make wolves. There are too many people around, and the ice bomb will hurt people's lives if you are not careful. Loya has to use the ice wolf that can bite people, and clean up the trash first. But it was enough for the recruits to drink a pot. The wolves formed in the air, opened their mouths and rushed towards the recruits. Quick, hack them. Watch out, they're strong. Ouch, my ass. Asshole, die. The recruits shouted, raising their weapons and slashing at the ice wolf. Fortunately, the assessment venue was large enough, otherwise hundreds of recruits wouldn't even have the distance to run, let alone fight back. Where are you looking? Suddenly, a voice full of fighting intent sounded behind Roha, and Roha, who had not yet landed, didn't turn his head, agitated the ice on his body, and shot out following the voice. Ding! The steel chirping sounded, and the slender ice connected to the long sword, making a harsh noise. Tony Mill wanted to hurt Loya with a sneak attack, but he didn't expect the ice on Loya's body to be so hard. Not only was it not cut off, but his arm was numb. With the strength of the recoil, Loya kicked on the ground after landing, jumped up and rotated 360 degrees, and kicked Tony out with one kick. Try my 720 degrees roundhouse kick. Obviously only one turn, okay. Tony, who was caught off guard, roared in his heart, then loaded his head into the floor and smashed the sturdy slate into pieces. Loya seemed to know what Tony was thinking, and explained to himself, "That's not it, did you turn around? It adds up to 720 degrees. Extreme blast." Just when Loya was pretending to be X, there was a coquettish shout from the top of his head, and the heavy object roared down, and the target pointed directly at his head. Not choosing to dodge, Roha tightened the icy armor on his hand, and then clicked on it with a finger. "I'll point you to Izumi, asshole." With the sturdy nature of the ice armor, Loya's fingers penetrated Laurent Mini's animal leather shoes and clicked on the soles of her feet. The latter's aggressive attack was broken in an instant, and he flew out with a scream, and after landing, he couldn't help rolling with his legs. Loya once had an experience. When he was hospitalized with a stomach problem, an old Chinese doctor massaged him. When the old doctor squeezed the young Izumi point with his knuckles, the soreness made him want to die. If it is used to attack, Minnie's current tragic situation is the proof. The fiasco of the first and second places in the recruit battalion made the recruits who gathered up dare not step forward and stop. Upon seeing this, Simon, dressed like a noble boy, commanded, "It's too crowded." Everyone from the elite battalion helped to entangle him. Our top 20 side responded, and the rest immediately cleaned up those ice wolves. Don't get close to the battle circle. Once Loya leaves, you immediately pester him and don't let him rest. As he spoke, Simon took out a handful of iron sand and threw it at Loya. Magnetic sand arrow rain. Countless iron sands paused in the air for a moment, and then shot at Loha like bullets. Simon's fruit ability is called the pointing fruit, which can guide inanimate objects he touches to the target location, but cannot guide them out of sight. Because of this power, even if he does not enter the elite camp this time, he will be taken care of by Zephyr in the future. Where to find such a good sniper? In this assessment, in order to avoid accidental injury, it is not allowed to carry guns, so Simon grabbed a handful of iron sand as ammunition. Chapter 40 Elite Killed. The attack effect is remarkable, and Loya is not a lot of guys. Facing this shotgun-like attack, he subconsciously chose to defend, but he did not expect to give the members of the elite battalion time to approach. Aludo is still the same old way, posing for a collision. Boom. This time, the unprepared object became Loya. The ice armor on his chest made an overwhelmed creaking sound, and Loya, who suddenly lost his center of gravity, was smashed and flew out. In the next second, two figures stepped on the moon and came to his back. The good and fast swords Zanyu and Duan Izumi in their hands fit together and slashed towards Loya neatly. One knife, two sections. *2. God TM is a knife and two sections. I accuse you of plagiarism. Loya complained, extending Bing Ling, trying to block the attack like Tony did. But the Jerome brothers are not comparable to Tony in terms of skill or speed. Besides, these are two knives, can they really block it so easily? The two knives quickly separated when they came into contact with the ice that was reaching out horizontally to block the attack. The blade and the ice rubbed the ice crystals, which were scattered in the air, and then went up and down, and suddenly cut to Loya's neck and thighs. There is still such an operation. Luoya felt the sharp slash behind him, and couldn't help strengthening the ice armor. Click. The sturdy ice armor saved Roha's life. Even if he held a good knife, the Jerome brothers couldn't break through the ice armor and hurt him, let alone armament hockey. Cut the turtle shell is really hard. *2. The Jerome brothers missed a hit and stomped each other's feet to avoid Loya's subsequent counterattack. That's Brother Jerome. The combined attack is really strong. Sengoku, who had been expressionless for a while, suddenly praised with satisfaction when he saw the two of them moving in unison. Karp held his nose and pouted his mouth regretfully when Roha fought back, saying, "So what, Aldo is so stupid that he will armament hockey, they still can't, just break through the attack of that level. The brat's defenses can't do it. Saying that, Garp flicked his booger forward, drawing an arc in the air. Sengoku's face darkened, and he lowered his voice and shouted, "Cap. Pay attention to your identity." "Yes, yes. Got it, got it." Garp poked out his booger and ears, showing an humbly and unrepentant look. "You." Sengoku shivered with anger, and was about to teach him a lesson, when Zephyr spoke to stop the two of them from arguing. "Like what? You are here to watch, not to be watched. If you want to fight, I feel ashamed to be on stage with you." Hearing Zephyr say this, Sengoku's fist couldn't fall. He had to let go of his hand impatiently, and looked at the flawed battle on the field, pretending to be interested. Although Loya blocked Jerome Brothers' attack, the strength made him slam into the ground quickly. And where he landed, Aludo with his mouth open was moving his shoulders, and Armament Hockey dyed the already jet-black glove deeper, waiting for the prey to come. Cannon Fist 100 Cannons. Not only is Aludo simple, this move is also so simple. The so-called Cannon Fist, 100 Cannons, means that it can fire 100 shells. Of course, this statement is a bit exaggerated, but it also proves the strength of this move from the side. Loya didn't want to use the ice armor on his body to test whether this punch could hit 100 shells. He held both hands towards Aldo, his thumb and forefinger intersected, and aimed at Aldo through the diamond-shaped opening. "Just be honest with me for a while. Aludo. Ice make endless chains." This time, the ice cube was not launched from Loya's hand, but formed out of thin air around Aldo. It only took less than half a second to go from illusory to solid. Aldo was confused. It was tightly entangled in chains. After practice, the ice coffin is no longer limited to being released in situ, and can now be freely generated within a range of 5 meters. Letting go of his hand, Loya used inertia to spin and roll to kick Aldo, who couldn't move, to fly. The claws of the ice dragon. Arudo bounced and fell on the ground like a springtail, rolling farther and farther, smashing a big hole in the wall. Loya clapped his hands with satisfaction, and looked at Simon who was digging out iron sand with a strange smile. "Although your arrangement is reasonable, you have miscalculated one thing, and that is whether Arudo and the others can entangle me." Gollum. Simon suppressed his inner tension, tried to maintain a personable appearance, and brushed his bangs up. "Yeah." Then. Boom. Before he could finish speaking, Loya used the 720 degrees roundhouse kick to kick him away again. But this attack did not fully work, because two figures appeared next to Simon in an instant, grabbed his waistband and exerted force in reverse, venting the strong twisting impact. Jerome. It was the Jerome brothers. I have to say that as long as the two cooperate, the twins can do well. It's like now, except that the foot on Simon's face hurts a bit. The more serious second-stage damage has not been exerted at all. Juro, die Loya. We'll beat you. In a word, Brother Jerome finished speaking one word at a time, magically coherent, and even the tone could be matched. Judging by ear alone is no different from a person talking. After finishing speaking, Brother Jerome used Shave to step forward again and besiege Loya. Whether it is attack or defense, Roha is much stronger than the two. But with the high-speed movement ability brought by Xiao and Yubu, and their own extraordinary swordsmanship, the two still entangled Roha head-on. Simon on the side shook his dizzy head, and quickly ran to pull Tony out of the ground, while letting the recruits go up to harass Loya while pinching Tony among the people. "Damn. If you go on like this, you will lose. Wake me up. Wake up, hey." The strength of the Dragon Slayer magic can only be increased and cannot be reduced, and any move will be fatal to the recruits. Therefore, Roha has never used a large area attack to clear the field, but because of this concern, the keen Jerome brothers seized the opportunity, and when Roha was dodging a sneak attack by a recruit, he used the combined attack technique again to chop at him. Neck. The whistling in his ears made Loya's scalp tingle. What a shameless play. Luoya was secretly shocked, and at the same time expressed admiration for the skills of the two. This attack was a sneak attack, and Loya had no time to block with ice, but that didn't mean he would sit still. Jingle. With the crisp sound, Brother Jerome widened his eyes and looked at the weapon in his hand in disbelief. I saw that the two of them, weapons were stuck on Loya's shoulders, still 1 centimeter thick from his neck, but they could no longer move forward. Through the touch of their hands, the two brothers knew that they didn't cut anything, and it was Roha's brute force that stopped Zanyu and Duan Izumi. Just tilting your head and shrugging your shoulders can burst out such terrifying power. Maintaining a posture of tilting his head and shrugging his shoulders, Loya glanced at the two good knives that were close at hand. I heard that swordsmen will not let go of the swords in their hands unless they die in battle. He smiled wickedly, letting the strong cold spread backward along the blade, and the visible frost quickly covered the blade. The two brothers looked at each other and squeezed the Kiba pass, but they didn't move. Juro. After loosening his neck, Loya stepped forward and patted the two people who were frozen into ice sculptures, and praised, "Yes, if a swordsman gives up the sword in his hand, he is not worthy of being a swordsman." Then the iron fist of the ice dragon was reinforced twice. Supporting Tony, who was awake, Simon happened to see this scene, and suddenly burst into tears. "It's over, how can we fight now?" The three main forces, the sturdy thighs from the elite battalion, were all wiped out in just a few minutes. One was there as zerglings, trying to crawl back into battle, the other pair were now ice sculptures. Although they have a large number of people, they have a numerical advantage, but Loya has not used a large-scale attack yet. In the stands, Garp sees the opportunity to taunt Zephyr. "This is your elite camp disciple. This is a spike, hello, it's a spike, right?" Zephyr took a deep breath, his face black and dripping with oil. "After my careful research, I found that it was not my problem that the chapters were messed up yesterday. It's the mobile assistant who is kidnapping. For example, my 37 chapters are coded on the company notebook and saved to the draft box. Then, at the event venue, I modified it with my mobile phone, and then clicked save. Guess what happened? TMD is directly saved as it was before it was modified. Completely in vain. Just now, on a whim, I uploaded it to the drafts box on a computer, and then randomly copied a few paragraphs on the computer. After that, use the mobile phone to view. It is indeed modified synchronously. But as soon as I click save, it even exits directly. It will be what it was the first time it was saved. Let the wind and rain blow you, I will remain the same. Uninstalling and reinstalling is still the same, just haha.